do it. To all the killers and $100 billers, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, children, as well as babies, as I make sure that my phone is muted. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I don't know if you guys knew that. That's what you're on.
No, I didn't.
You are.
I've seen some things on social media.
Yeah.
I'm not buying it.
Yeah, we're a little dangerous. I am Deven Morgan, Direct Youth Baseball Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy, and I'm joined, as per usual, by my brother, my partner, my co-host, Driveline Academy Assistant Director, Driveline Academy International Man of Mystery, Jeremy Tecktiel. And with episode 71 now, again, for the second time, we have legitimate guests in the building with us. Not former Driveline employees, not former Driveline athletes, but in fact, real guests. And this one means a lot to me. We have Seth Taylor and Travis Snyder here. Travis, former MLB player. Seth, author, soccer coach, but also soccer coach. So, you can just throw those shots my way if you don't like it. We're going to talk about your guys' company, 3A. We're going to talk about the books. Hero is the parenting journal or book, Parent handbook. We're going to talk about the athlete journal. But first, housekeeping. We'll do abbreviated housekeeping so I don't make you guys suffer through the live ad reads we do. drivelinebaseball.com/academy. I think. I don't know. DriveLineBaseball.com, 425-523-4030. The Driveline Academy Flex training product is your ability to do driveline training basically anywhere. You come into the gym, you test, we give you programming based off of that, you retest, and you can retest or test remotely as well.
The new jump stuff is pretty cool.
Yeah, we have a new addition to our app where we can basically have athletes do the same type of jump testing that we do in the gym to quantify athletic development, which again is I just did the facility tour for Seth and Travis to kind of talk about the fact that we want to track athletic development separately from skill development because you're going to want to make sure you are progressing the way that you want to with both. So Driveline Academy Flex is your ability to kind of do that with Driveline and flexibly integrate it into your team so that you can do that stuff without having to be on one of our teams or be local to here in the Kent, Washington area or Scottsdale, Arizona, or soon Tampa, Florida.
Yeah, God willing.
God willing, Tampa, Florida.
Time.
Yeah, shout out to Zach Moraine, who's the Driveline Academy Flex manager and is evacuating his home because of the Cat 5 hurricane that is coming that way.
Also, shout out to Matt Kress, who moved there a week ago to work for Driveline there and is already evacuating the home. He just moved into a week ago.
Yeah, love to see that. So Driveline Academy Flex is a thing. What else? The Driveline Youth Power Bat is your way to discreetly train bat speed for youth players. We have a 30-inch version. We have a 32-inch version. I promise, guys, the 28-inch version is coming. I've talked to the manufacturer about it. We're going to figure out the minimum order quantity. We're going to get that rolling. It is informed by the bat fitting database that we have with over 700 some odd bats in it. It's basically your way to do bat speed training without getting negative swing adaptations. One of the things that we don't want to see when kids are doing bat speed training, specifically because it's overload, is you go to swing and they just dump the barrel.
Yep.
And then because of that, they have an excessively positive attack angle. So now it's we demonize guys that talk about chopping down on the baseball. Well, cutting up through the zone is really no different. So we don't want to do that. So we want to do overload training for youth hitters in a way that doesn't ruin their swings. We leverage all the data in the bat fitting database to give you that product. It's $99. You buy it, you swing it, it's good. The Youth Underload Smash Bat, $79. It's a skinny barrel. It's super light. You can move it really fast. You have to move it accurately. It's constraints, right? I mean, it's basically the same concepts in soccer. So we made a bat around that. Skills at Scale, the Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual is the book that's got everything in it. And if you're going to buy it, now is probably the time because it's October. And instead of playing meaningless fall ball games, you can actually work on getting better. Crazy idea.
Nah.
Crazy idea. I know. Anything else I'm forgetting? Housekeeping?
Axe.
Oh, AxeBat. Oh, my goodness gracious. I am moving fast. AxeBat.com.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's surprising. Normally that's the first one.
Yeah, my bad. AxeBat.com. Code DL20 will get you 20% off at AxeBat.com. D is in dinosaur. L is in lasagna. I think I used lasagna before.
I think you used dinosaur before.
Gosh darn
You may not have used lasagna, but I think you did use dinosaur before.
Deinonysus, Daihatsu. Daihatsu Lasagna 20 will get you 20% off of AxeBat.com. Shout out to Jay and the guys over at AxeBat. Jay at Axbat, maybe this is surprising. Maybe it isn't surprising. Huge bat nerd. Huge bat nerd.
That is unsurprising.
I know, but like it's, you think like the guys are at the top of the food chain for a company. Like you might expect that maybe they're not like as passionate about the thing because they're just like, you're just running the business.
No,
right?
I'm a business guy, right? Yeah.
Oh, Jay's a bat nerd just like me. We met for a couple hours week before last. It was great. Last plug. Go to the Driveline Youth YouTube page. We just published the hitting drills that we did with Axe. They're free. Go find them on the page. Do the drills. They're good for kids. They're fun, and it's not going to make you worse. So,
The Power Hour or no?
all right. Look, we got one last. I said this was going to be abbreviated, and I feel like I'm just doing thing after thing after thing. We are going to launch, I believe this week, the Driveline Hitting Power Hour. It's an hour-long hitting session. It's kind of a programmatic format, and then it's going to have like 3 phases. It's going to have basically like a warm-up round that's like just hit middle fastballs, feel good. It's going to have a challenge round. Hey, let's see higher velo, let's see some break. And then it's going to have a competition round. We're going to play like a 1v1 game or a 2v2 or whatever. Again, stealing as many of these concepts as I can from soccer instruction. If you feel some type of way about it, Deven at drivelinebaseball.com. So the Hitting Power Hour is the thing that we're going to launch. We're going to launch it in Washington and in Arizona and in Tampa once Tampa's not underwater. And the cost for you is going to be free $99.
I want to make it clear. That's with an F. That is not $3.99.
No.
That is FREE.
Yes, FREE 99 for a limited period of time. We want more people to understand this thing. We want more people to experience it. The easiest barrier that we can break down is charging you any money for it. So it's going to be free to start. You're going to come in and hit for an hour. You're going to work with our trainers. You're going to have fun. You're going to do the drive line, and it's going to cost you $0. I don't have a sign-up link for you that I could like give out yet, so just drivelinebaseball.com, 425-523-4030, support at drivelinebaseball.com. The Power Hour is coming to a city near you.
Too good of a deal.
I mean, yeah.
It sounds like a traveling like tent revival kind of thing.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I watched enough 700 Club in the mornings waiting for my favorite cartoons to start on, so...
Yes.
Again, telling on myself with my age. Okay, all that crap aside. Travis and Seth, how are you guys?
So good, man.
Okay.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
So, Travis, I think it's fair to say that when the article came out in The Athletic, that then later got repurposed in the New York Times,
Yeah.
about kind of what you're doing with 3A and the experience you had in baseball, period.
Yep.
I think I would hope brought a lot of attention to you / the company / the initiative.
Yeah.
But I know that the story doesn't start with when that article's published.
Yep.
So let's go like all the way back.
Yep.
Growing up in
Mill Creek, South Everett, Washington.
Humbabe.
Yeah.
When did you know that baseball was a thing that you loved?
I mean, growing up a Mariners fan in the 90s, it's kind of tough not to have that romantic kind of feeling for baseball. Family was Mariners fans. Ken Griffey Jr. obviously was my favorite player, like most of the kids that grew up in the 90s. And having the opportunity to go to games at the Kingdome, started participating, at the YMCA when I was really young. My mom worked there, so it was a cool experience for the kids in our community to get to play pretty lighthearted rec baseball at a young age. And during that time, the community of dads was pretty committed to like, let's keep this group of friends together. Let's go through the Little League experience.
Yeah.
So then kind of transitioning into the Little League experience, we had a core group of 7, 8, 9 players that had played T-ball kind of all the way through coach pitch.
Yeah.
We all go do our Little League things on our teams and then get back together to play on the All-Star team. So it's around that first couple of years of All-Stars where I realized not only were we a pretty good group of players, but baseball was something that I was excelling at, and it was something that I was very passionate about putting the work in on my own, not having dad tell me to go do anything. It was like I'm dragging dad outside, hitting me fly balls, pretending I'm junior, trying to rob home runs, that type of thing, right? It's what we really try and tap into with that younger generation of parents that has young kids. It's like, well, we can put them in organized sports, which has its pluses and its minuses, which we're trying to highlight. But at the same time, the play experience. And that's something Seth really helped open my eyes to as I was becoming a father with 3 kids now. It was like my instinct as a former professional player is structure, discipline, all the things I want to teach my kids. And he was a great mentor for me through that process to start pulling back those layers of why do I feel like I need to put that on my kid?
So we just started talking a little bit about the kind of the same thing when we were doing the tour. I understand that a lot of parents, they have all the investment that you would ever ask for in terms of like what they want to see their children achieve. But then I think the mistake that's commonly made is like, well, if this is good for a professional player, it's definitely good for my child. And I'm curious that like when you start pulling that back with Travis, how much of that is about like reconnecting about like kind of the joy of it for kids?
Yeah, that question it's a bit complicated, at least from my perspective, just because the joy of it for kids is pretty deceptive.
Yeah.
You know? What we
It can be,
perceive,
sure.
It's yeah. I mean, we perceive kids as joyful when a child, let's say you're 6 years old and you hit your first inside the park home run and you slide in and your parents go nuts and everybody goes nuts and the crowd goes nuts. We perceive that as this is the joy. But because we fundamentally misunderstand the developmental phases of how children are perceiving and experiencing their world subconsciously,
Yes.
we don't recognize that what we're actually doing there, it can be quite damaging. Like it's not the joy, right? Because everybody's wondering, well, why by the time they're 14 is the joy gone? Well, it's because of that. Because what we were actually doing was we were infusing their experience with these really extreme highs and these really low lows that were all connected to the feedback loop all around them. When what the truth is, they're in, kids at those young ages are in these developmental phases where they're actually what they're trying to do is develop a sense that I am safe, I am loved, no matter what.
Yeah.
But we have them in these performance environments, really, really young age, and so guys like Travis, they get out there, and even though he's going, I'm doing it, and I'm driven to do this even without my dad. Subconsciously, at the age he's at, is 7, 8, 9 years old. No matter what, the driver isn't towards baseball. The driver is towards what makes me safe, what makes me valuable in the world. And so that's the driver. And some part of his consciousness got connected to when I do this, I feel this. And of course, that's connected to the feedback. Of course it is. And it can be done on those extreme levels, that really intense feedback that you find in the games and practices, and also in the actual subtle feedback we get, the looks on mom and dad's faces. I'm sure you guys talk about the car ride home, that experience. So what we're, what with him was about kind of going, hey, let's get into how trauma of all those developmental years, plus just the acute trauma of dealing with some of your own life story, is developed this fundamental subconscious platform on which you try to build a professional career. And that's why that's why the game is so one of the reasons why the game is so fragile. It's so hard to maintain success is because the platforms that most of us have developed to do are actually quite fragile.
It's funny because I think if we had the ability to have honest conversations with a lot of kids, I think if they were going to tell the truth, they would actually say that there's a lot of the experience in youth baseball that does kind of revolve around fear in a weird way.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And the more that we under-index for the truth of that fear, I think the more that you're just like not meeting the kid where they are, right? And you're not kind of dealing with like the sum totality of all the emotions that they have, right? Because I think you're exactly right. In the configuration where we are incentivizing the result, which is different than incentivizing the process and the effort, you are kind of just inherently laying a trap. You're laying a trap, and especially in our game, because in our game, that failure is inevitable. And you probably should be finding it, right? Like you should be finding it. You don't need to necessarily accelerate the timing of when you find it, but like eventually you should find it.
Yeah.
And then when you find it, it's like, okay, well, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Right? Because if all I've been applauded and I've gotten the attaboys and whatnot for the way that I produce, what signal is being sent subconsciously, to your point, Seth, about like, well, I get love because I produce,
Yep.
right? But then in the absence of that production, then what's the feeling?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on growth mindset. Developing an achievement-based mindset, right, is something that has become normalized. And I think that's where us as parents don't even realize a lot of times we're saying things in a certain way to our kids in certain situations that building, as Seth refers to it, as an elephant balancing on a pool cue or building a house on really bad foundation, is not understanding even the kids who are excelling at an early age of sports, right? It's very tough for the parents' egos, because we all have egos as parents, not to feel that kind of pull you in and say, okay, I got to really harness my child's ability to play this sport, without recognizing the risks of pushing them to those next level before they're actually ready. And you talked about it earlier, intentional conversations. That's probably my favorite exercise in this book for parents. Is like, here's a script of 8 questions that a lot of times we as parents don't think to ask, or we ask them in the car on the way home from a game when an 0 for 4 or a loss or something like that is really all the kid can process in that moment.
Yeah.
And we want to have the conversation, well, what do you love the most and what do you hate the most? It's like, no, take them to a safe space, ice cream, coffee, whatever it is, and actually ask them a set of questions with zero intention of trying to answer the question for them. Just listen to them.
Yeah.
And not every kid is at that place where they're ready to have those conversations.
Sure.
But I think that's a goal every one of us as parents should have, is to start teaching our kids how to speak their truth.
And then you got to be open to what you might get.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Jeremy and I have been dealing with a kid that I think both have invested. I mean, you've invested more than I have, but we love him. Yeah. Like, you know, we love the kid, and it seems that some of his more recent choices are like, I don't know, I can't tell if it's like, if he's choosing to kind of pull away from baseball or other things are pulling him from it.
Yep.
But like, you know, it's so difficult because, you know, he's a kid who I think both of us see all the talent in the world, and we see all the potential in the world. But like, the truth of it is that if he doesn't want that, which is a separate thing that you can kind of unpack for why, you know, what are we supposed to do? And, you know, we can't really twist his arm and be like, hey, you right. got it. You know,
like you said, if they're not ready to have that conversation, it's not worth having that conversation. Nothing good is going to come out of that conversation. So it's the part of like where, you know, coaches have egos too, right? This kid is good and has been good for years for me, and I want him to continue to be good for my team. And so I've got my own selfish reasons for wanting to keep him here and keep him involved in baseball. But like, I also know that, and this might be hyperbolic, but the difference might be going to college and playing baseball and getting a degree and doing anything after college that like that entails versus not going to college, staying around this area, maybe not having the ambition in life that I would hope for him. But like, I can't force him to do that. Well, that's a conversation that he has to be ready to have. And like,
I think the hardest thing about being a great mentor or a great coach is actually finding the players where you connect with them and you understand what are those underlying fears or the subconscious reasons that he's pulling away from it. Now, it could be he's just lost interest in it, right? But that's where I think Seth is best to speak on. Like, what are some of those things that you see in kids when they're having success or they have the talent, right? And the coaches, you guys are doing the best you can to like insulate this kid and give him the opportunities. But how do you go about unpacking that with parents that you work with to say, hey, what are some questions? What are some things we should be thinking about outside of, oh, he just doesn't like baseball anymore? Because you mentioned it before. Fear is a big thing that we don't want to admit is always kind of in the room with us. And when you start to have success, now all of a sudden the imposter syndrome starts to set in. Am I really this good? Do these people really love me outside of my ability to play the sport?
Yeah, right. And especially in baseball, man. Yeah. Like, especially in baseball. I just feel like there's so much about just the root construction of the game lends itself to like these very binary outcomes.
Yeah.
And children, as far as what I understand, courtesy of people like you, of people like David Yeager that was on last week's episode, who wrote a book from 10 to 25, The Science of like motivating young people. They're not equipped with the cognitive tools to see the nuance in the gray area of development and process.
Sure.
They lend themselves towards like this very binary understanding of the world. And then you couple that, I think, sometimes with this trap that we as parents sometimes lay entirely non-intentionally.
Yeah. Sure.
Like entirely non-intentionally about, am I going to love you the same way when you go 0 for 4? right? Like, am I going to love you this? And man, I've stressed out about this for as long as I've posted clips of my son doing sports stuff online. You know, like there's, you know, the video that's like pinned on my Twitter is a video of he and I just like, you know, doing some side soft hitting in the backyard. And it was probably 5-6 years ago. So he would have been like 10.
Yep.
And, you know, the point that I was trying to make at the time is that there was this whole discussion in like hitting Twitter at the time about the value of different training modalities, right? Hey, is side soft toss really like getting you?
Yeah.
Does that map to hitting in-game pitching?
Yep.
And like, well, it doesn't. I mean, we can get in the skill specific part of it, right? It's probably better than tee work because you're still making a perceptual decision about when and where you need to swing, etc. But what I said was just like, you know, side soft may or may not transfer, but like the stuff that will transfer is the moment that I have with my son.
Right.
And he's done stuff in the game over the last 5 years that was like, it makes me incredibly proud as a parent.
Yep.
I leave that post up there because if I got hit by a meteor tonight, whenever he has the opportunity to go like, I want to like take a look at how dad talked about stuff.
Yeah.
I want that to be the thing that he sees.
Yeah.
And it's a terrifying thing. And Jeremy knows, like, I stress out about this on the podcast frequently.
Yeah.
It's a terrifying thing to have a child that really wants to be good in baseball.
Yep.
Once you start to like wrap your brain around the true, not only difficulty of the endeavor, but all this other like causal stuff that could happen completely inadvertently.
Yeah.
Completely inadvertently. You know, like it's a real tough thing to navigate, trying to constantly make sure that your child's attachment to sport is like intrinsic. And that it's not, I play because dad thinks dad's going to love me the most if I do.
Right.
Yeah, can I speak to that?
Yeah, of course.
Because you know, the truth is it's clearly a mix of those, right?
Sure.
And we can accept that's just part of the gig, and that's why it's helpful. You know, Travis and I are kind of like Old Testament prophets, like shouting from the mountaintop, like, just so you know, from 0 to 12, that's the developmental phase that they are forming their identity. Period. If they were placed into a competitive space and given a feedback, then we clearly. I mean, this is the human condition. We tie our identities to the feedback of the ones we love that we need their love from. So it's part of it, right? We actually kind of group it into that space. The problem is that we don't take the fundamental. If we can say we just said that, like, listen, we're going to take the fundamental stance that my kid's identity is intermixed with this game, and then we start to adopt an awareness and maybe a skill set and tools to help them untie that as they get older. Then as their relationship with, you know, what we're talking about is the formation of their relationship with failure, their relationship with competition, their relationship with success, which is even harder than the one with failure sometimes. Yeah. We're talking about the formation of that relationship. Then we have to adopt an awareness and a skill set that as, you know, they hit 14, 15, 16, and in those adolescent spaces, and some of those traumas start showing up. Now, son, let me show you how to untie this and unpack this, because now, son, we can really move into a space where there's an actual kind of a flowering, in a sense, of their highest self can kind of return, and then joy becomes actually kind of a baseline again, right? Yeah, you know, it's a returning, but we have to accept that is a part of it. It's just fundamental to being human. We put our kids in school at 5 years old. We start talking about grades by 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. We start doing these kinds of things. It's normal in American culture to do that. I mean, this is the thing. If we want to take a proper model, we'd have to go back to really ancient indigenous cultures, where it's like, you just watch everyone go for the hunt, and you play at home, and until you finally go, when's it going to be my turn? Yeah. And when it's time, son, and then we go on walkabout or something at 12 years old, and you become a man when you are ready, right? But here we don't do that. We don't look at kids and go, when they're ready, we'll put them in there. We put them in there thinking that that's what's going to get them ready, and the truth is it just doesn't. I mean,
at the ABCA, the youth committee meeting, or the youth summit last year, you know, we were talking, and it's it's Ryan Brownlee, it's Rob Haney, it's all these, bigwigs at ABCA, but then people from across the country that are kind of just like are going through. They're involved in youth sport in one way, shape, or form, in youth baseball. And I can't remember. Somebody was talking about they were dealing with a local league that was like trying to have kids doing like drop third and steals at like 8 or something.
Seems smart. It's a good way to slow down the game.
Got to get
miserably.
it.
Gosh.
But the way that it was explained, got to get them ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to get them ready.
For what?
And it's like, I mean, to
question,
your
right?
point about the hunt, right?
Yeah.
If you can't pick up the spear to throw it at that animal that we need to kill so we can eat,
Yeah.
why are you going on the hunt?
Right. You need to be at home.
Stay your ass at home.
Yeah.
But, we don't do that here. And, it's crazy to me how the last 5-10 years has played out when you see things like 5U tournaments.
Right.
Like I just,
Yeah.
One of the things you said, I'm slightly changing course here, but one of the things that was really interesting to me was the relationship with not just failure, but success.
Yeah.
Do you feel like one of those is easier to deal with, or one of those is maybe more important to deal with at like a younger age?
I think okay. So the way I did this with my kid, I held both my kids out of organized sports. My son was almost 10 the first time he stepped into it, and he really wasn't quite ready. Right? But the way I did it is from the beginning. I started framing everything as like when he would right away he went in, you could see the fear show up right away because all of a sudden, well, there's winning and there's losing, and there's successes and there's failure, and they're going, whoa, what is this space? You can tell emotionally they're not ready. When they're 5, we can just throw them in there. They're like, huh, what?
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
and then they feed on that feedback, right? But at 9 and a half, 10 years old, he was just like, whoa, this is intense. And right away he starts going, is this guy good? Is he good? Am I good? I remember one day he's like, Dad, do you think there's this kid on this team named Hassan? Do you think Hassan's the best player on the team? I go, no. He goes, what? I go, no, you guys are all terrible. Like there's no good players here, man. I go, you guys are really, really bad. He's like, well, and he kind of was shocked by that. I go, son, listen. And I actually had a whiteboard in my office, so I drew this big spectrum.
Yeah.
Said the best player in the world is over here. What's his name? And he's like, Messi. I'm like, Messi's the best player in the world. I said, and over here, there's a newborn baby being born up on Capitol Hill in Seattle right now. I said, that's the worst player in the whole world. I go, 8 billion people in between.
yeah.
Where are you? And I handed him the pen, and he's like, about right here. I'm like, all right, so what's your job? He's like, try to get right there. I'm like, yeah, that's the whole thing. I said, there's no good and bad. There's trained and there's untrained, and I've been framing that and messaging that for a long time. Now, does that save him from the fear? Not really, but I mitigate that through understanding that his fears are going to be based on whether he's safe with me.
Right.
My feedback,
man.
my body stance, my facial expression, the words I speak immediately, the way I view the entire way that he feels my presence is going to create whether this space is safe or not. Right. Because in the end, the developmental thing is, am I loved? Am I safe? Am I valuable? And it's parents' jobs to form that within a kid. And then in a secondary way, coaches and things like that. So I just kind of monitor that. And I don't need it to be safe for him. I don't need the game to be safe. It's not. You're going to lose. You're going to fail. You're going to get your butt kicked. I got to be safe for him. If I am, then so meaning when he comes off the field, I don't say, how'd you do? Let's talk about what you. I just it's straight up a rule. He comes over. I say, how you feeling? And then whatever he feels is fine. And if he says not good, I just say, you want to talk about it? And if he says he wants to talk about it, fine. If he doesn't, most of the time he goes, good. We go, great. He just got their butts kicked, but he's like, you want to get some ice cream? Yeah, let's get some ice cream. And we go. And I'm going to do that until the day he starts to go, that sucked, man. I want to get better at this. I want to get in. I want to start doing this kind of thing. And because that safety solidifies within his identity.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we're really dealing with. I mean, even when we were just watching this kid out here that was in the batting cage, we were in the tour. I mean, I've been training myself for over a decade to be able to read body language and feel where the fear is in there. Even what he's experiencing, it's just really a triggering experience. You can see the conscious and subconscious at war with each other. Well, if I went up to him and said, how old were you when you started playing organized sports? I'd probably say 4.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, that's trauma. That's just how it works. And again, Travis and I don't think we're here to tear the system down.
No, because I'm the parent that started my kids at 3, just the way I started my kids at 3. And what we talk about in that first exercise, like, what are your core memories with your parents and playing sports? Because whether we want to admit it or not, it's not all bad, but there's stuff that we repeat consciously and unconsciously. So the great thing for me of having Seth as a partner and having gone through this process and teaching this now is like, my kids are out there. I have one who is not the center of attention, no birthday songs, does not want to be on a field with a crowd.
Yeah.
He decided in T-ball, he wanted to play T-ball, so I signed him up, knowing that the experience was going to be whatever he wanted it to be. So we went out there. He played defense in probably half the games this last year, opted out of hitting. What do you want to do, son? Well, let's go to the park. Okay, we're going to go to the park, right? Because as I've learned and as I've been trained, my presence is the most important thing. And I witness this all the time. T-ball, flag football, that's what we're doing right now. Yeah. It's so hard for a parent to see the thing they love the most, as Seth would say, ripped out of their chest, running out there on the field. And for us, the emotional attachment, we don't want to always admit it, but it's the same way we get triggered by our kids when they don't have their shoes tied when we got to be out the door to get to the practice on time. It's like, wait a second, I'm the adult here. I'm the one that didn't give my kid 30 minutes to tie his shoes because he's learning how to tie his shoes. Yeah. So I'm getting triggered by this experience the same way it's so easy for us as parents. Our kid doesn't want to be on the field. Our kid's not as good as some of the other kids. He doesn't do something right. And that's our instinctual response is to want to yell something from the sidelines. Hey, little Timmy, do this. Little Timmy, do that. And it's just like, whoa. If we just took a step back and we all looked at this from a 10,000-foot view and we're like, okay, does my 5-year-old or 7 or 9-year-old really need to be experiencing this in the way that we're providing it, or is there a better way we can do this? And as Seth said, we're not going to go and tear down every league that starts at 3, 5, 7, 9, 12 years old, but let's start educating parents on where we're at in this process and help them mitigate some of these risks that come with the feedback loop that we're creating, the achievement-based identity that kids are developing from a young age, because it's like we were watching the kid in the cage. After every swing, looks right back at the hit tracks. I was that guy for most of my career, right? Because I'm always attached to the result. As much as I learned about the growth mindset, it's so hard when it's been kind of your foundational piece of identity is like what I do is a direct reflection on who I am.
Right. Yeah, you are that exit velocity number.
Yeah.
You know?
Which is where you guys get a lot of crap, right? Because you guys deal with a lot of data and analytics, which there's old school people out there that hate Driveline or hate anything analytical, and it's got to be all natural. It's got to be it's not that, right? And it's not that every stat has, as you guys talked about through the tour, certain things have certain values. Yes, we can learn stuff from data, and we can implement that into the way that we train our kids to make it a better experience for them. But the one thing I love that you guys talk about is gamifying that experience, right?
And that's the thing, right? I think, like you said, the traps that are laid in the game are non-negotiable, right? Like we can't look, man. It's
try not to keep score, but the kids keep score.
The kids keep score, right? It's going to be 3 up, 3 down, and that it is what it is. I think the thing that we try to lean into is really the process that comes from that, and instead of going like, I am that exit velocity number, it's the things that I did produced that result. What can I learn about that informs the next rep?
I think the perfect example that you gave a while back was the video game experience, right? The best way to make your kids hate video games is stand behind them and tell them everything that they do wrong. But how many kids, addiction or not, right? There's components to this are also dangerous, but when a kid is locked in on a video game, they might throw their controller, right? But they're going to pick that thing back up and keep trying because nobody's sitting there over their shoulder telling them how they did this, and this wrong. Yeah. But they innately start to figure it out. If I do this move and I do that move, it's not going to work. This is the process.
They'll play level 30 times.
Exactly.
They will.
And then finally they break through and they learn that, and it's like this big aha moment for them. But it's not because somebody was sitting there, mom or dad wasn't sitting there saying, you got to do this. That would be the end of video games. If we want to take video games away from our kids, we can all just stand behind them, tell them what they're doing wrong.
That's phenomenal idea.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody... I think that there's some real truth to the actual like deep dark underbelly of sport and this idea of talent that really comes down to you probably don't have as much control over it as you think you do.
Right.
And we can work in this environment and like work really, really hard at really specific skills, right? And we can track that stuff. We can communicate it to athlete and say like, hey, the process got you so much better.
Yeah.
The effort that you put in got so much better. And try to like kill that whole like you're talented or who's the best player thing, right? I think the perspective that we have on it is that like we want kids to understand that like the version that you are today is just who you are today. The work that you're going to put in kind of says whether or not you change what tomorrow looks like. But ultimately, when it comes to like the actual competition itself, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know.
I think that's where it's gotten crazy, though, is because, again, we won a state championship when we were 9 and when we were 11. This is Little League All-Stars, Washington State, the whole experience. Now, from I don't know what age, 6, 7, 8, probably 9 is when it starts, player rankings, right? And,
I know.
And that just feeds into egos that we all have as parents. When my kid's really good at something, it feels kind of good inside. The same way when we watch our kid that struggles at something,
Of course.
doesn't feel very good inside. But the whole point we're trying to make here is we got to learn how to manage those emotions the same way we're trying to teach the kids how to handle those emotions. Because if mom and dad are riding the highs and the lows, what is that teaching the kid, right? If we're modeling that behavior, this whole idea of growth mindset, process, that's not what's being celebrated.
So let me ask you a question that I don't know the answer to. Did winning state championships at 9 or 11 help or hurt your baseball experience?
I would say both. I would say when I was 11, I talked about this in the article.
Yes.
I threw a no-hitter and hit 2 home runs in the state semifinal game. I remember this like yesterday, right? Because it's a core memory, and I still have energy. I got goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah.
I go down to the Western Regionals. This is back when San Bernardino was the whole West Coast.
Yeah.
And we're staying at the barracks. We're doing the whole thing. I mean, it's a dream come true for kids to have that experience, right?
Yeah.
Well, I go out, I hit a home run in the first inning, strike out the side, and I go back out in the second. And something triggered, right? Emotional experience, throw a couple of balls, walk a couple of hitters, and all of a sudden I had sports-induced asthma at the time.
Yeah.
I had a panic attack, right?
Yeah.
And in that, I saw a kid this weekend have a kind of similar experience in one of the coaches or one of the sports that I coach.
Yeah.
And it was over a penalty that he got that a couple people said something to him, and it's just like, to Seth's point, so many kids aren't emotionally ready for that type of experience that you're going to have these big traumatic experiences, right? We use the term trauma, which is it's a triggering word for a lot of people just to hear the word trauma and trigger. But it's like these are negative experiences that create some type of experience that we have, and we carry that energy, we carry those memories, we carry those emotions, those thoughts. That's why I get goosebumps when I think about it. Because at that age, I wasn't ready for that. As good as being one of the best players in the state at that point, again, fed into the kind of the ego and the narrative that kind of built throughout my youth career. But at the same time, recognizing now how I want to protect my kids or at least be there for my kids in those moments to help them navigate it. And I don't blame my parents for having a panic attack when I was 11 playing baseball, but these are some of the things that get overlooked, right? When we're sitting there saying, okay, this is the best thing for our kids' development is just put them in the most competitive teams, go play in all the best tournaments. We got to do all the perfect games and all the different classifying, what do they call them, showcases. I mean, we're showcasing 9 and 10-year-old kids for what? There's no college
It's a great
recruiters
question.
there.
It's a great question, ladies and gentlemen, because the rules are that they can't talk. Coaches can't talk to these kids now until before their junior year, like right before they're about to start their junior year.
Talking about college coaches.
Yes. So who in the world are we showcasing for?
Parent egos. I got an ego too, so I'm not trying to sit here and point the finger, but like we get caught up in that.
100%.
100%. 100%. Like it's just the whole thing is insane.
Can I say, because what you seem to be hitting at when you kind of just going, this is nuts, is that, you guys probably more than 99.9% of the people in the world will have this perspective in this facility to be able to look at all the work that goes into making these guys good. And I imagine it can be a little frustrating because you're going, it doesn't seem to do it. You know what I mean? They get better, but the thing is, the vast majority of athletes that come through here or any other training center never even come close to fulfilling their potential.
So that's one of the harder things, right? Yeah. And we've had a couple of athletes who, like, some of those meetings, it is almost easier to hear that you're not talented enough as opposed to you don't work hard enough.
Right.
Like, it could be there. You're just not working hard enough to get the thing you need to get. You're not putting in the work in the weight room. Like, that actually is probably a much harder conversation to have with a kid and his parents than, like, you just don't have the innate talent to make it where you need to go.
That's the thing, is that's what we're here to do, is what we're trying to do. And it's weird because in the sports world there is this weird zombie-like thing. It's hard to speak into that space. There's not a lot of... We're just trying to wake people up. Mm-hmm. The fact that the reason that's the overwhelming reality is because all of it is subject to psychology. And so sports psychology is becoming a thing. But the problem is psychology is subject to therapeutic work, which is emotional. And emotional work is subject to trauma, which is quantum, right? The quantum universe from which all things come is dictating the reality of every athlete on this planet. And we are not effectively translating those truths into how we develop players. And perhaps that's because our egos can't handle the fact that if we're going to speak these things, if we're going to bring this thing into existence, like in a facility like this, where you go, listen, just so you guys know, there's a pyramid of player development, and it all begins at a quantum level when you were born. It begins in this first 5 years of your life, which are by far the most important 5 years of your life. It starts there, and your ability to be a professional player depends on how we treat that thing, that field that exists within you. If we don't bring that in, we're just going to be spinning our wheels more and more and more, spending more money, doing more things like that. But if we bring it in, the problem is we also have to confront the fact that we're a part of the problem. You know what I mean?
Right.
That we contribute to this system.
Right.
And we have to deal with our shit.
Right. And it's tough because I think the whole thing feels very obtuse.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, like specific to like us here, right? The stuff that we track and we're able to quantify, it's a ruler. You know, it's a stopwatch. And we can see those things almost transparently. Mm-hmm. That's very different than the circumstances that might compel you to go, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Yeah. And I'm not coming to that place because of a quantifiable deficiency in skill. I'm coming to that place because there's like a fundamental piece of trauma or fear or context that I can't resolve internally.
Yeah, it's existential.
And then even more so when you're talking about the fact that these are children, and like as parents, we're trying to shepherd that experience in some way, shape, or form. And again, this is like the trap of having a kid who wants to be really good is, on the one hand, I think it makes sense where you're just like, I'm gonna be there every step of the way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? I'm going to be there every step of the way. Like, I think there's this clip of Tom Brady going around on Instagram where he was like, when he told his parents he wanted to be like a professional quarterback, he wanted to play professional football, they were like, great, let's go get it. Yeah. And it wasn't, well, hey, this is really, 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 really hard. Yeah. And you're not, you know, you're not like, oh, the Aaron Judge version of whatever that could look like. That's not what Tom Brady was as a high school player, or even before that. Yeah. And his parents, in spite of that, were like, yeah, like, let's go get it. Yeah. And it's not even the internal confidence thing. Like, I saw this podcast interview with Derrick Rose, and they were talking about like the tail end of his career. And it was like, well, you know, did the confidence start to wane because all the injuries, like, and all this other stuff? And he was like, confidence was never my problem. He was like, I used to pray because I thought I had too much confidence. And to your point about like the first 5 years, like, where does that come from? Yeah. You know, where does that come from that you've got a teenager or an adolescent or an adult who is literally like on hand and knee, dear God, I think I've got too much confidence. Yeah. Yeah. You can't teach that.
Sure.
I don't even know how you practice that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the whole thing seems very esoteric. So as parents, we like see our children as like an expression of things that we can't define or control.
Yep.
But then simultaneously, and I think the reason that like books like this are so important, the reason that you guys should check out the Athlete Journal that 3A also has, which I gave to my own son. The reason that stuff's so important is because I honestly think that just like the journey of self-discovery for the athlete is the most important part. Mm-hmm. You know, like I can't take my kid down to the park and practice acceptance. Yeah. I mean, I can show him what it looks like. I can talk him through it, but like I can hit him fungo. You know, I can soft toss feed him, right? I can catch him and fear for my life when he decides to just like throw me a turbo sinker that he doesn't tell me about. Like I can do those things. Yeah. You know, on Friday when we had to get our throwing in.
Got you with the 86 in the thumb?
I think it was a hybrid B day, so it wasn't 86, but I saw my life flash before my eyes. It's like, okay, I'm going to go buying a new set of
That's what the
glasses.
last time I caught him was he was 14.
It's not fun.
Maybe some catcher's gear too.
I'm like, we're at that point.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to capitulate because in my very meager athletic career, I used to catch.
Okay.
So I'm just like, but when I stopped catching, no one was throwing 86 turbo sinkers. So like I have an excuse. But point being that like that stuff is it's just kind of out on the table. Sure. You know, like that's stuff that I think I can train. I think a lot of parents just fundamentally don't know how to deal with this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the reason why books like this are so important, the reason why the athlete journals that you guys do are so important is because it brings this stuff to the surface in a way that I think is like, it is actionable. You can, hey, let's have these 8 questions that we're going to ask in this conversation to start to break this stuff down. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't, the current loop that we're in is just going to get worse.
Very destructive.
It's just going to get worse. And it's like, I was, you're going to see this on social media later because I'm going to do a whole talking head video about it. But I was scrolling this weekend and I see this clip on Reddit of a dude who has like thousands, and I mean thousands of bees living in the walls of his house. Like complete new fear unlocked, right? Yeah. Like, so the guy's got thousands of bees in his walls. So this guy comes out, he's I don't know, beekeeper, pest control, whatever. And he pulls, and it was like right by this HVAC unit. So he pulls the panel off, and it's just a wall of bees. And he takes this device that looks suspiciously like a shop vac, and he starts just like vacuuming up all these bees. Gets all of them done, pulls off a layer of honeycomb. Oh, more bees. Vacuum, vacuum, pull a layer of honeycomb. More bees. Wash, rinse, repeat, right? So most of them are gone. And if you look at the video, the comments, everybody is very concerned about the bees.
They didn't do anything wrong.
Hey, did you do this the right way? Yeah. Did you kill all those bees? Because you can't do that.
Right.
You can't kill these bees.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the comment section, obviously, is not filled with zoologists. It's not filled with beekeepers. It's regular-ass people like us that are like, you can't kill all those bees because we understand the relationship between bees and pollination and our overall ecosystem, right?
Sure.
We understand that.
Yeah.
We don't understand safe limits about pitching volume and pitching frequency for children.
Yeah.
How is that a thing?
Well, and it's also that there's also a correlation there between that guy was almost definitely an apiarist if he was clearing out a ton of bees from an HVAC. So it's like, that guy's an expert.
Yeah.
And we have a bunch of non-experts in the comment section being like, I don't think he's doing that properly. Like, I think he's killing those. It's like, what do you know?
But they're even worried about it, is my point.
Right.
They even are tangentially aware that you can't just, like, mass slaughter thousands of bees that are living in your flippin' house. You can't do that for the fear of what that's going to do to our environment.
Sure.
We don't, at scale, understand the trap that is being laid for children in their first 5 years, or even from the 5 to 10 years with this current version of travel and select baseball.
Yeah.
We clearly don't understand it. All you have to do is look at the pitch count in these fall ball games. All you have to do is go to USSSABaseball.com and look at the team rankings and sort by most games played to least. We don't understand it at scale.
Yeah.
Well, not just that, is like there's tournaments that have innings limits, not pitch limits. And then you got kids that play on 2 teams, and there's no communication. There's no education for the parents to understand.
Yep.
I don't know if the camera can see it, but I got a nice big scar here and a few chunks of my elbow that were taken out after my freshman year.
And not as a professional pitcher.
No,
right?
I was a high school pitcher, or at this time I pitched as a freshman, pitched all the way through Little League. I also caught, right? Which we say that out loud now, like no shit if you're going to catch and pitch every weekend. But I would have fought my coaches if they tried to take me out of the game because I was that intense, competitive, trying to earn the love out there on the field kind of player where I kind of commanded the space at that time. But that, again, I don't blame my coaches. I don't blame my parents. Nowadays, we have more information, and we're not making the adjustments. We're not really going through this with a fine-tooth comb and saying, on the physical side of this, what is overuse? What does an actual pitch count or a pitch limit look like? How much is a kid throwing in between those pitching outings? How are they building up? How are they creating rest periods? All the stuff that you guys have dove into, right, with tons of analytics to back it up. It's just become the normal blanket statement for most of the organizations out there.
Yeah.
Or most of the tournament people that run these things are like, we just want to get as many teams here as we can and not worry about the quality control.
It's on the coaches, right? Like they're just going to say, well, we told you what the rule was, so it's on the coaches.
Yeah.
Which, to me is really no different than, again, than kind of what we're talking about. about trying to tell parents like, hey, some of this stuff might not be appropriate for your child.
Okay.
Your child might not be ready for organized or high-level competitive sports at like a single-digit age.
Yeah.
When the mindset is like, I got to get them ready.
Yeah.
Like, I got to get them ready.
Yeah.
I got to get them ready at 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, whatever, for this future version of themselves as if they are appropriate for the future now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like,
Training like professional athletes is obviously something I did for 16 years, and I pushed my body to the limit. I invested a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy into learning about how 2 ankle surgeries and an elbow surgery and a plate in my left foot, how that affects the way my body moves.
Yeah.
And what I need to do from a training standpoint, what I need to not do, right? How I can build my body up to be able to withstand the force that I'm putting through the joints and the certain exercises that I'm doing. And I learned a lot of that by making mistakes and then working with people who are much smarter than me. And then going back to it now as a parent, going into this space and having lots of friends, best friends that are coaches in youth baseball,
Sure.
and having these conversations, not to try and demonize coaches, parents, or tournament directors, but just say, hey guys, we're the adults here, right? When can we start to really have these higher level conversations and understand the damage that we're doing physically to the kids, which that's not even what our company's about, right? I've just lived that. But on the mental, emotional side too, is like all this has just gotten pushed down to the younger levels. And parents, I'm a parent too, fear of missing out. It's a real thing we experience. Even when we don't succumb to that fear and put our kid in a situation where we think it's the best thing for them and then we think about it's probably not, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I learned firsthand with my son is having that intentional conversation with him as basketball season was starting up. And it was like, what do you want to do? And he's 6 years old and he's in the back of my truck and we weren't even in the coffee shop or ice cream, but we had created that line of communication. And he opened up to me about his experience the last year and what he liked and what he didn't like and how he would want to make this decision based off of these experiences. Yeah. I'm like, thank God I asked you that. Because my ego as a parent would have been like, we're moving up. We're going to the better team. We're following this group of friends, which we love the friends and the coach and everybody was great. But that experience for him wasn't the same as the experience was for me. And that's something I think we lose sight of as parents is like, this is a 6-year-old kid I'm talking about at that time. Whereas it's happening at 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And then we're getting to a point where kids are quitting by their getting to high school. And we talk about potential. I mean, how many kids had the potential to play varsity baseball or whatever sport that quit before they got to high school because it just got so intense before they were even ready to handle it.
Yep. Right. Yep. I mean, I came very close to screwing that up for my own kid. Like very, 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 very close.
Let's just say though, parenting it's really hard. Like sports, non-sports, parenting is one of the most challenging things I've ever done. It's taught me more about myself than I ever wanted to learn, and it's going to be a continual, as you know, right? It's a lifelong journey, and I'm grateful to have this guy as a mentor, as a partner to kind of help guide me through that. But like you're saying, it's very easy to say, a lot harder to do. And this is somebody who goes home and still will yell at my kids from time to time. We'll still have those triggering moments where I'm like, oh, that's a sign of something that I need to work on to get my shit right so that I don't push it onto them.
Yeah, and it's because it's not an intention issue. No. You know, like I mean, I still say that, again, do that thing. Go to USSABaseball.com, look at the team rankings, sort from most game played to least. I don't think that the people that are running those teams that have played 130, 140 games with like single-digit age kids or 11s or whatever, because that's not really that better.
Yeah.
I doubt that the men and women running those teams are any different than us in terms of the intention.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think they see that's the path, right? That's the path.
Yeah.
We just, if you want to be the best baseball player, you got to start by playing the most games.
Right.
I don't think that's the path, but I can't necessarily, I don't know how at scale to help people understand that, like, that's not helping, you know, like other than the way that we typically approach it, which is, okay, well, if I understand what good competitive, the metrics of a good competitive 12-year-old player look like, right? If you're 10, let's figure out where you are right now versus where you want to be in the next 2 years. There's a gap. Okay, well, we can develop those skills. We can develop them in a fun, in a gamified way that doesn't involve us playing 250 games over the next 2.5 seasons or whatever, right? And that's, I think, how we approach it, because that seems like a better path.
Well, and it's not terribly dissimilar from you drawing the graph and like where are you on the graph, right?
bell
Like
curve,
we've got I've been coaching the same group of kids since they were 12 at like the 13U age level. They're now in high school. They're going to be playing 18U. For a while, they've been able to look at the state rankings or like the national rankings and see like the exit velos and like, I have a better exit velo than the top kid in the state of Washington. And why is my name not up there? And it's like, you do have a better exit velo than that guy. You're still not good enough to showcase.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're still not good at baseball. So like, sure, you could sign up and go to one of these showcases and put up a number that's probably higher than this kid and be the number one ranked kid in the state. And is that going to make a real difference in how you approach training or any of this? Like, no. So don't care. Like, why are you caring about that? Don't pay attention to it.
I would argue it's actually quite damaging to have that stuff.
100%.
Because the ego, see, this a lot of it has to do with ego development, like the part of the brain that is structuring the narrative of my life, right? And those kids at these young ages, that's what my son was doing when he said, "Is this guy good? Is that good?" He's trying to form the story. What's the story that? But the story is based in what makes me okay,
right?
What makes me safe and what makes me love. That's ultimately what it is. But identity, the identity. This is where we fall into the kind of area of psychology that we call, attachment theory. The idea of a child is trying to form a secure attachment to self. And we form that by having a secure attachment to mom and dad, right? And most people get more of like an anxious attachment or an ambivalent attachment. Some people it gets real severe, but like what they're trying to do. If we just keep handing them more and more narrative structures, their egos just go, thank you, yes please, yes please, yes please, to put together this structure, and none of it's actually real. It doesn't make for a secure attachment. It makes for the story of a secure attachment, and that's what lays the bomb. There's a time bomb ticking underneath it all. Yeah. One of you guys said that. Was it you that was talking about this kind of trap that gets laid inside? It's a trap door. Yeah, it's a trap door. I mean, Travis is a really good example of that, right? Laid within Travis, where there was a trap door, and it was just a matter of, well, what's going to trigger the trap door? We'll get him to a high enough level with enough pressure and enough money involved, and then trap door gets, boom, it drops out, and then you drop in. So you get guys who get the Jared Kellenics of the world, who killing it at AAA, goes to the pros, and just, boom, that trapdoor opened up and dropped right through. I had a conversation with an agent earlier this year about a player who was just so awesome the first year and then struggling the second year, and we don't know why. And I was like, well, this is why. The trapdoor, he signed a $150 million contract, whatever. That's a trapdoor, boom. And it opened up, and then how do we get back to that connected space? Well, you have to deal with what's happening on a quantum level now. But that's laid within most kids. I mean, we were out there. He's got it inside of him. And what's going to trigger it? Get him to a high enough level, and he will. Because then the high enough level, the narrative structure that the ego's holding dissolves. Right? I'm working with an all-American soccer player at a Division I school, like a high-ranking Division I school right now. His coach came to me because he said, and it's tricky, because most people that come to me for work, they're whether it's some executive or some professional athlete, something like that, they're in a space where they're like, I need help. Right? And that makes it easier for me to help people when they're like, I need help. This guy came to me, his coach came to me saying, he's an All-American. He's going to be a pro, but he has no shot whatsoever to make it as a professional unless he does this work. And so we started talking about it. So the kid comes to me, and I'm like, do you know why you're here? And he's like, well, coach says I should need some help and I should work with you. I'm like, okay. And so we start, and then the goal is to wake him up to his own subconscious, because sure enough, that time bomb was just set right inside. And the second he gets to the pro level, it's going to blow. Yeah. And if he has no awareness of what that is, like, it's going to be this holy crap, and his ego will just run for the hills, which is what happens to most people. I mean, you guys remember the name Kyle Lewis?
No, yeah,
right?
Of course.
What happened? He's not even playing professional baseball right now. Like he was a rookie of the year in 2020. And he's an overwhelmingly common story. I mean, maybe it's a little more extreme than else, but the thing is, all these guys, because of how the identity development is so fragile, it's the elephant balancing a pool cue within most people in our culture. But especially, the better the athlete, the more trauma there is. Because that is just laid in there, and then you get them to a high enough level, the narrative structure falls apart. Boom, and they drop right into the trauma, and no one gave them an awareness of it or tools to deal with it.
I was an 80+ makeup guy. I had a local scout send me his. He just sent it because he wanted to share it with me.
Yeah.
And I shared it with the person who wrote the article for the New York Times, just off the cuff. Like, this is what I'm talking about. I checked every box of every professional organization. I ran captain's practices. Our team went 27-0. I hit after every game on the field in front of 10 to 20 scouts and put on an absolute show. behind the scenes, there's a bunch of shit that was going on in my life that was a complete mess, but baseball was a safe space. Baseball was the narrative that was going to get me out of my situation, which it's a very common story amongst professional athletes. I'm going to be able to buy my mom a house. I'm going to be able to do all these things, which I accomplished by signing a $1.7 million contract out of high school. Yeah. Now I'm in this space where I go to rookie ball, I win the MVP. I go to shorts or long season, first full season, should have won the MVP. Yeah. Next year I'm in the big leagues. I'm 20 years old, man. Yeah. Like, look at all the guys who made the big leagues when they're 20 years old and what kind of career they had. You know who the other 20-year-old was that year? Clayton Kershaw. A little bit different career trajectories that we experienced, right? And I competed against that guy all the way through. Yeah. And for me, the trap door was I get sent down, which happens to more players than not. Yeah. But to me, that was all these narratives that my ego had created at the time. 2 great months, AL Rookie of the Year, $100 million contract. I'm going to be a career Blue Jay. I'm going to retire here. We're going to like. It took off. Instead of where am I right now? Where do I want to get? What's the next step that I need to take? Right? It starts going 10 steps ahead. Yeah. And I think that my story, what we try and weave into a lot of the things when we talk about this, is helping parents understand it's not going to be your kid getting sent down from the big leagues. Statistically speaking, it's probably going to be very few, if any, of these kids that we're talking about. Yep. So that could be the 13U elite team. That could be the junior varsity team as a sophomore. It applies to all sports, right? It's like, where do we get past that threshold where we no longer feel safe? And then how do we respond to that based off of how the foundation's been built, which I checked all those boxes from a makeup guy. And then that experience happened, and it was like, I worked with great sports psychologists, great people along the way, taught me a lot of great skills, but I never got to the root. And that's where at the end of my career, when I started working with Seth, making that decision to retire, spending my last season in AAA, having my third child, all the things that were going into that decision. But it was like, man, there is so much shit that I need to go back through and start to reprocess this in a way. Otherwise, it's going to affect my marriage. It already had. It's going to affect my parenting. It already had. It affect my relationship with the people I care the most. And that's because being an athlete is a very selfish experience, especially when the ego is driving the bus, right? Which I've also been told there's good pieces to the ego, right? And I think the self-awareness that we're trying to create amongst people here is like, okay, you can leverage these systems for good and for bad. Now, we have to be aware of how they function, right, at all 3 levels that we talk about, because it's thoughts, it's emotions, and then it's the actual energy, right? How many times have you guys worked with a kid and you've seen them execute, and then they get into a game in a certain situation, they lose it? It's like, one of the questions I asked one of the kids that I work with is like, hey, what does that feel like in that moment? Oh, well, my heart rate speeds up. Okay, that's a natural reaction. The ball feels heavier, the ball feels light. It's like, we need to lean into this. Where does this take us to in your past experiences? Because there's a moment or moments in time that you went through this already, and it's triggering this response like, I've hit my peak. I can no longer push forward. I'm not the player everybody thought I was. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that you could have gotten to the root any sooner than you did? Like, do you think that there? Because this is the thing to me, where sometimes it's just like, you know, we were talking about hitting earlier, right? And it's just like, look, man, I don't know how anybody hits anything ever at the highest level of competition. I just don't. I don't. I can unpack the skill from the things that we can quantify. I can unpack constraint training and making practice more relevant to competition rather than just like coaches throwing like middle 45 mile an hour, you know, cookies or whatever. But I don't really understand it. And I think when it comes to some of this stuff, you know, I think about, look, I was a shitty athlete. I don't have a story to tell there, but I didn't figure myself out until I was probably almost 40.
Right.
Which is sad, I guess. It's a little bit unfortunate, but it's also just the truth.
It's a human experience.
And that's this, I guess the thing that I'm curious about is like, when you talk about getting to the root of it and really diving into the stuff that allowed you to resolve and like move through those things, do you think that you could have gotten to it sooner than you did? Or was the time that it happened just the time that it happened?
I think it all evolved the way it was supposed to evolve. Because if I would have made the $100 million, if I would have played 10 years and checked all these boxes, the narratives that my ego had, I never would have had to do the work, right?
Yeah.
So when I look at what my purpose is for life after baseball, I acquired a ton of skills from being a professional that translate into the real world.
Yeah.
But when I go down to the MLB Alumni Association Career Development Summit, and I'm watching guys that have made $150 million or played 2 days in the big leagues, all walking around with the same look on their face, like, who the fuck am I and what makes me valuable?
Oh, boy.
And I got to speak on the panel the second year for this whole conversation we're having right now, because so much of our experience is just on this pedestal, achievement, achievement, achievement.
Yeah.
And then the day comes where they tell you, dude, you're not good enough. You got to retire, or you got to go home, whatever you're going to do, go play indie ball. I did that too, right? Whereas like the last 6 years of my career leading me to working with Seth was just a battle. My love for the game of baseball, my love for myself, my actual self-awareness, because I have a very advanced ego. It's been well-trained over the years to be able to think I'm on the right path when I just need to keep doing the work. So to me, I don't think there was a moment in time. Now, maybe if I started working with Seth earlier on in that process, my experience of how I was going out there and functioning would have been different. But I had to get to a place where we worked really hard is to come to peace with that and understand I can be the bitter guy who sits at the bar and tells people, oh, Google my name, check out this home run that I robbed. I got a little kid to do that
Uncle
for me
Rico.
now. But yeah, exactly.
See that mountain over there?
I got to wear my Letterman's jacket because our team, our high school team, got inducted into the Snohomish County Hall of Fame, which was really cool, right? Because it was a team thing, not just about me.
Yeah.
But they're like, hey, wear your Letterman's jacket. And I was like, that thing still fits. I put it on, you get a little extra swag. You kind of feel like a D-bag on one side because you're like, what 36-year-old guy wears his Letterman's jacket? I'm like, hey, they told me it's the last time I'm going to get to wear this. But then I'm looking at all the patches on there, right? All the achievements, all the things that I was known for, celebrated for, put up, like popular in school. I was a good athlete, all these things that, again, seem like the perfect life story. But then get to these darker underbelly experiences in my career and realize, A, I wasn't prepared for that failure. B, I wasn't prepared mentally and emotionally to handle just the lifestyle that I was living, because what I've learned about my experience is I like to have a predictable kind of outcome and see the clear path, and baseball was anything but that for me.
Yeah.
So it was just a constant roller coaster where I'm just like, who am I? What am I doing here? Why am I playing baseball? And work ethic was never the issue, right? There might have been a few times where I didn't really push myself as hard. But the thing we lean into with coaches when we're talking about is like, if you don't make a kid feel safe and loved, especially the adults that have a bunch of unmet needs like I did, a lot of coaches aren't aware of that, especially at the major league level. It's gotten better over the last few years, I think, but the presence and the energy that you create in the cage can be far more profound in the impact of that player than just great mechanics or just great data. Now, all those things are completely applicable to the conversation, but if we don't have that kid's trust, which most of the coaches at that time didn't have my trust, part of that's my own conditioning, part of that's the way they approached me, I can't sit here and blame any of those coaches for my struggles. It was our experience together in that moment.
Yes.
And understanding, okay, as I'm a parent, as I'm a coach, as I'm speaking on these things now, how can we all come together and say, you know what, we're all bringing baggage into this, me included, him included, right? As much work as we want to talk about doing, it's going to be a lifelong thing for us. But how much more can we create the awareness and understanding in those moments if we make kids feel safe and feel loved, whether they're 10 years old or 30 years old in the big leagues? That's the first step, right? Because if your kids come in here and they've had a complete shit day and they're overstressed, overstimulated, and you're sitting there trying to do a certain and it's like, that's where you guys as coaches have learned, okay, we need to scale back here. We need to simplify this. We need to gamify this. We need to find ways to make this something where the experience for them is what we need it to be, not what we want it to be.
What was so we talked about going up through like 12U winning like Little League stuff. What was your high school experience like, baseball-wise?
I'll start with travel. So we 13 took a core group of those all-star teams, joined with another group, had a one of the best teams in the state, and then went to a national tournament, got kicked in the teeth a little bit, which was a good experience. We kind of added on to that core group of kids. And then I'll rattle this stat off: 76-6, 82 games at 14 is a lot, right? We can talk about how that's too much, right?
Yeah.
But 76-6, number 2 in the nation, right? And again, this is when Baseball America first started posting team rankings, not player rankings, just team rankings. So we're going through this and we're feeling ourselves, right? And go through the 15-16, start playing up, still going. I think we won 3 national championships in a matter of 2 years, 14, 15. I mean, success was not, other than playing up and getting humbled a little bit, we had success all the way through. Then we went to high school, choked in the state playoffs my freshman year, choked meaning we had all the potential, all this thing that we never fulfilled, right? Bad leadership, just the whole situation. Sophomore year, we get bounced in the district playoffs. Junior year, we took third in state. We lost to Michael Lee, who got drafted. Great changeup, humbled us, right? We end up smoking the team for the third place game. Steven Souza, if you're listening, shout out. Cascade High School, sorry. And then senior year, we go 27-0. Yeah. And that was, I mean, we talked about it at this Hall of Fame thing. It was like, there was no question in our mind that we were capable of doing this. Now, we got a little scared in the first game against Lake Washington. It ended up being closer than we expected. Played them again in state. They were probably the only team that really gave us, and these are kids we played against since Little League, so we knew all of them. Yeah. And then going into the state tournament, I mean, the numbers on our team were ridiculous. Just the pitching statistics and the hitting statistics. I mean, but it was a core group of kids that had played together through YMCA, through Little League, and through high school, which is, to me, we can talk about all the stats, but the fact that I'm friends with most of those guys, that I coach some of their kids, and that we're in a community together, and we're going through this process where we're having these conversations when one of the kids on the team has ADHD and the dad's stressed out because his kid's falling behind developmentally speaking. I'm like, bro, slow down. Okay?
So are you able to immediately go to that guy and be like, hey, man, we need to find some safety? Is that like an immediate jumping off point now?
Yeah, I waited a little bit of time because I wanted to approach it in the right way, and then I found I just had to do it. So I did it, and it was kind of uncomfortable, but it led to a much deeper conversation where a lot of things were put on the table. I'm like, I completely understand where you're coming from, dude, and I don't want to demonize you, but if you're going to be the dad standing behind home plate, telling your kid 3 different mechanical cues before every pitch, when it's me and I mentioned Steven Souza, another former Major League Baseball player on the field coaching your kid, and our third coach played at the University of Washington. Tell me what you see. Tell me what you work on with him, what works for him. He's got a different personality. You're going to know your kid better than I will, but most parents don't know how to articulate and communicate that to coaches, right? And it becomes this really tough barrier of communication because there's overbearing parents that are stressing out coaches, right? We talk about that all the time. So in that moment, it was an initial conversation that wasn't very well received, but because we got a 20-year history of being best friends, we worked through that. We talked through it. It brings a completely deeper understanding of what he's going through, what I'm going through, how we're going to team up on this and come up with a plan that's going to work. Yeah. And again, kid ended up having a pretty good year, right, for coach pitch, but it's so easy for a parent, myself included, to sit there when your kid's not the most talented or most physically developed or whatever term we want to use for it and say something's wrong. And it's like, well, let's just look at this from a bigger picture here. This isn't designed for his personality at this time. So if we can manage those expectations or just remove them from the situation, but stay in the situations but mitigate some of these things, it makes for a much better experience for the kid and a much better experience for the parent.
Yeah.
Did you play travel through high school, or you just played for high school?
Yeah, so I broke my ankle sophomore summer. It was a football injury, so I got hurt in June and missed the whole summer, played scout ball like that fall, and then hung up the pads senior year of high school. I didn't play that summer, right, because the draft had basically run its course, and I knew if I got hurt doing that, it was going to be
bad news.
Yeah, so I had like a 4-week window where I probably made some poor choices of how to keep my body in shape, and just being an 18-year-old kid, knowing you're getting $1 million, it's like, how do you process that as a whole nother conversation? But no, I mean the experience of youth and high school baseball, I don't think could have gotten any better from the standpoint of success and achievement, right? But a thing I always like to highlight too is there was a community of parents. As I was going through my mom being in a coma for 2 weeks and at the hospital for 3 months, it was the second moms and the second dads, all the mentors that came in and just surrounded me and insulated me, even though I was a kid doing stupid things, which kids do. I had so many great moments in time where that community of sports insulated me to the place where I could at least get past where I was at and start to think about things in a different way. Now, was all that done perfectly? Absolutely not. But there's so many more positives and negatives to take away from that. So I don't want to demonize the sports experience because it was a huge part of who I am now. It's still having relationships with all those families.
Yeah.
Was there a point when you were in professional baseball, maybe when you got that first demotion back down to AAA, that you looked around at some of the athletes, because you're a 20-year-old back in AAA now, probably the youngest person on that AAA roster?
21 that year, yeah.
21, like one of the younger ones on that roster, even though you had big league experience already. Was there a point where you're looking around at guys who had very different backgrounds than you and were like, I wonder what I would have been like, or like, how does he deal with this issue so well?
Yeah. I think AAA is probably not the best place for those examples because a lot of the guys are in AAA for a reason. The older guys, I would say.
It's like rookie ball when you first.
But yeah, I would say though in AAA there were guys like Chris Woodward, right, who ended up managing the Rangers for a while and was a Mariners coach, Dodgers guy, awesome human being, and just a great role model and somebody I needed there to kind of bring me back to center and help me understand, dude, this is just a part of a much longer game here. Let's not lose it. But you also, at every level, right? I talk to kids that go to junior college. They're disappointed because they're not on the Division I team. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, you're going to go to junior college for a reason, right? And then you're going to get to junior college, you're going to go to Division I, and there's going to be maybe a couple guys on that team who want it. And the rest of them just want the jersey. They just want the ability to say, hey, I made it, right? Which is kind of what I experienced in the big leagues. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, if you can't separate yourself from the herd and you just want to do what everybody else is doing, you're just going to end up like them. And I think that's something that happens in AAA a lot is you see guys go down and never go back up because it's always somebody else's fault. And that was something I wrestled with a lot in my career, blaming other people, blaming myself, blaming my whatever it was, right? As many excuses as I could try and make, but without actually doing the work to start to actually process them and reframe them in a way. It's like, no, these actually gave me some superpowers if I learn how to channel this energy and use it properly.
Man. Yeah. It's funny, like the high school experience, and just, you know, we're having these constant conversations now with my son because he wants to play football. And
we've had the conversation.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's one of those things where, like, I literally was, you know, the wife and I went out I think we went out to go get food or something this weekend when the kids were at homecoming, and I was like, you know, there's a part of me that I feel not great about telling him that he shouldn't play football because it's part of a period of time where, like, this is just the window. Yeah. You know, like, the high school sport window is going to end. Yeah. In this period of time, you can do some stuff, you can do not other stuff, and, like, I want to tell him that, like, you should leave no box unchecked, right? That you should enjoy that experience. But then there's also the baseball coach in me that's like, okay, well, you're going to give up 2/3 of your off season, or maybe a half of it. That's going to have definitive impact on the amount of development that you're going to get into, and that development is directly to relate to the competitiveness you express on the field, which is going to directly relate to your ability to continue to play the game, to just find a place to keep playing.
Yep.
And I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You catch me on the right day, and I'll be like, you know what, he should just play football his junior season and, like, just whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a part of me that's like, if you want to open up these doors for the most competitive experience and whatever comes afterward, then, like, well, no, that's the dumbest thing that you can do. Yeah. And I know that ultimately, and this is the conversation we ended up having in the car. I was like, because we ended up talking about other dumb behavior that kids in high school are
no shortage of that.
Subject to. Yeah. And you know, fortunately, my son is very smart about that stuff. But you know, we're talking about just some of the stuff that he sees with kids that he goes to high school with, kids that his teammates go to high school with, and I was just like, some of those people are going to be just fine having a high school sport experience, and it doesn't need to be more than that, and that's okay. But kind of accepting that thing to a degree means that you have more runway, you have more slack in the system for doing some of these stupid things.
Yeah.
If you want to choose the other thing, it's really, really important that you want it for you.
Right.
Because the only thing I really know concretely about that other thing is that it's incredibly difficult and it requires an insane amount of work and focus. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to choose that thing, you need to choose it with both eyes wide open, because if you're choosing it for anything other than that, then you're going to resent that choice later.
Yeah.
I don't know how else you wouldn't.
But the dilemma there is that no 16-year-old has his eyes both wide
no.
open. Right?
No.
Right, and that's, you know, the difficult thing is this place is built, you know, most of our kids are older that play in our academy. This place is built to get you to go play college baseball.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like when they're 13, 14, we're built to get you playing high school varsity baseball.
Yep.
But like once you're a freshman, it's to play college baseball. And there's a lot of stigmas around college, right? Like on my team, I have kids who both parents went to college, are highly educated, and it's not even a question baseball aside, whether or not they're going to go somewhere for college.
Yeah,
Baseball might be a part of that, but they don't have an option of, I'm just not going to go to college.
Right.
I've got other kids on my team who neither parent went to college, and they kind of think college is stupid.
Yeah.
Right? Because I did fine by myself without going to college.
Yep.
And trying to talk to that kid about, hey, I need you to put more work in because you're not going to be able to get to playing college baseball if you don't do X, Y, Z. And the response is, well, I don't want to play college baseball. I don't want to go to college. I have no interest in going to college. So it's okay, well, you're probably not getting drafted out of high school. And if you have no interest in going to college, your playing career is done when you're a senior in high school. And that is totally okay.
It's totally fine.
Totally okay. Right. But it's kind of uncomfortable in this setting. Right. Because you're going to be with a lot of kids that have a very different goal than you. Yeah. Right. And either you're going to have to be comfortable putting in maybe less work and just be willing to put in less work because it doesn't matter as much to you because you basically where you're at, you're already going to be a competitive varsity player. You could stop trying and have the success that you want, which is just being a varsity high school player. And this is a really hard place to be that person because we are always looking at this is what you need to become a college player. But we don't often have the conversation of do you want to go to college? Is that a thing that you want to do in your life?
Yeah. Right.
Because this actually might not be the place for you if you have no interest in going to college.
Yeah.
Because you're going to spend a lot of time trying to get to a place that you don't even want to go to.
Yeah.
Your time is better served maybe playing football.
Yeah.
Right? Doing more social things, spending less time trying to get better at baseball when you're already hitting a ball 90 miles an hour and that's good enough to play on varsity. Sure. And you can have a great varsity career without putting in that much extra work. And those are really, really difficult conversations to have with a 16-year-old who doesn't know.
Yeah.
And is getting a lot of that outside, stuff from parents or whoever, high school coach, leaking into what should be a personal decision that winds up never actually being a personal decision.
And I think the only thing that we can do is just is hope that, again, that there's something about the process. There's something about the process that we're teaching here that informs the broad spectrum of whatever you decide to do at the end, right? That's the only thing. Like you said, it equipping you with kind of these superpowers and all these skills. I think we see what we're trying to do specifically in the team format as basically the way that we can, because we try to train parents, right? I mean, obviously, we're talking about literally how 3A can work with us and work with our parents to do some stuff. I think that's a thing that we'll be able to do. We've got other stuff that we do very intentionally to try to train parents, but they're not paying for that.
Yeah.
They're not really, and that's okay. It's okay. I understand it.
Yeah.
So instead, it's hey, how much of this process can we impart on these kids to take that away?
Right.
Sure.
You can be done playing sports as a high school athlete, and there's this process-driven improvement is a thing that means something to you, and you can apply in another venue.
Yeah.
We hope.
Mm-hmm. Can I speak to that real quick? Because going back to your kid, the question around playing football. The only reason that we keep, you guys have brought up several times this idea of what do you want to do? Looking at the kid. Well, kid said he wanted to play football, right?
Yeah.
He wants to play football from his level of consciousness, which is relatively low. Most 16-year-olds aren't terribly away. That's what they want. The only reason it's even struggle is because our attachments to the other thing. You know what I mean? As parents, we get attached. We can see because we're at a higher level of consciousness. So we see, well, if you do this and this, you can get there. And we are attached to that.
Yes.
Because they come saying, we want to play football. And you're and then we complicate it. Instead of just going, I'll let go of that and go, sure. Play football.
The same way you mentioned, though,
Yeah.
right? You look at what you'd be sacrificing by making that choice, and at some point you might resent that. But on the flip side, if you're not given the opportunity to play football, not saying you're telling him yes or no, but you're encouraging him to think through this decision. What if at some point he wakes up and says, man, I really resent the fact that I wasn't given the ability to play football. Now, there's physical aspects of this. I've had 2 surgeries. There's concussions. There's more than just the baseball aspect that plays into this whole thought process for a parent, right? But I think what Seth's highlighting is you flip that the other way around. It's well, we're kind of saying one thing and doing the other, and not trying to put you on blast as a parent, because these are moments I'm going through at a very young level that is only going to intensify as you've experienced, right? Because now we're getting closer to this goal that might be our child's, right? As your son is very bought in and wants to do these things, but how much can we put the bumpers up for them and let them run versus just say, okay, you can do whatever you want whenever you want, right? Because we can't do that as parents, but at the same time, where is that give and take?
Yeah.
I think football personally is the hardest one. Because, like, if Danny came to you and was like, I would like to golf this fall, I don't think you would have had the same conversation.
No, because the football conversation, I keep it very myopic in terms of the impact on development, because I don't want to deal with the other side of it, which is the concussion side.
And
like,
see, that's for me, that's the actual side,
Yeah.
right? Because I came up in the scouting world where, like, it was like constantly said the best baseball players don't play fall ball, they play football.
Yeah.
Right? Like, these are the strong, these are the athletes, like, these are the guys we want to draft. And I don't necessarily disagree with that.
I know.
Because I'd rather a kid play football than fall ball.
I'll say this: football toughened me up. Not like in the foundational issues that were never the needs that weren't met and the things I didn't get right. But there was a point where I broke my left leg when I was in third grade, and up until that point, I faked injuries, 100% faked them, right? And I had already gone through this whole asthma attack, panic attack experience. So it was like my dad's sitting there like, how the hell do I raise a kid who's going to be soft? You know what I mean? So I ended up breaking my leg in the game, right? And my coach and my dad looked at me and were like, hustle down to the, halftime, go get your oranges, and we're going to give you the speech, right? And they're old school, tough guys. Yeah. So I'm limping down there, and they're all over me. And for the next week, I walked around with a broken leg. And finally, I said, Dad, I don't know what's going on, but I think I need to get it. And it wasn't like a compound fracture or anything like I experienced my right leg, but it was like in that moment, football gave me a gift. Now, the broken leg is not the gift we want for our kids, right? But it's like the old parable of like the kid who breaks his arm and doesn't get taken to the army. I'm going to butcher this, but essentially in those moments, we think this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to them, right? But on the flip side, if we allow them to experience these things and learn from them, right, then we're actually giving them the ability to start learning these things on their own. And that's, I think, the hardest challenge for us as parents is like, when do you push, when do you pull? How much information can we give them to help them make an educated, right? We'll use educated decision on this thing, but without trying to cut their legs out from under them, for lack of a better example, wanting to experience some things that he's never going to have a chance to play high school football again.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I keep my perspective on it very myopic on the development side, because honestly, the biggest blocker is not me; it is his mother and my mother,
who you
his
got to deal with
grandmother,
too.
who
Exactly.
like, Mom, I hate. I'm just saying it. So let's say I give you guys the keys to the castle, and I say you guys are in charge of coach and parent education for every aspect of baseball pre-high school. What's the first step? Like, what's the first thing that you want parents to start to be able to grapple with and learn before they go out there and are like in charge of stewardship of their kids' sport experiences?
Yeah. You want to take it? You want me to take it? Well, first thing they do is they all go through this. The very first year your kid plays is coming into our club or our federation, whatever we're running here.
Yes.
The World Baseball Federation. Here.
Sure, the WBF. Let's go.
Every single one of them goes through Hero.
Yeah.
And goes through it and actually is accountable to go through it. Like, it's one of the things that we're trying to, when we're talking to baseball clubs now, talking about, hey, when we talk to directors, we're like, if you're going to buy this, make it mandatory. They're like, well, how do we get parents to go through it? Like, mandatory.
And Hero is the parent guidebook.
And that's where, to add on, that's why we want the service aspect of this on top of it, right? Because we want to be able to connect with the parents and help them understand instead of just say, here, you need to do this, right? Which is one approach to it, but the amount of buy-in is going to be much smaller.
Yeah, nobody wants homework.
Which is where I want to weave in my personal story. I want Seth and I to be able to have these conversations with parents so that they understand it's not just a couple of guys that are trying to tell you you're a bad parent, right? It's like, no, there's 3 exercises in the first section of this book where what are your past experiences with your parents or grandparents or whoever it was in sports? How does that affect the way that you parent now, right? How are those core memories deciding this? The second one, go to your kids' next 3 sporting events. Don't say a word. Anytime you want to say something, anytime you feel something, you think something, write it down. Now go back through those 3 games of notes. Where are the patterns at? What are the moments and we're losing our shit? We're not dealing with our shit as parents that it then gets projected onto our kids, right? And then the third one is having that intentional conversation, which I think, as I highlighted earlier, we overlook how important those conversations are. Or maybe we kind of check the box, but we don't do it in a safe space. We don't put our stuff aside and just ask the questions and let your kid open up, right? Because as you mentioned earlier, there's going to be some stuff in there you probably don't want to hear, right? But you need to hear it. And as I've experienced this with my own kids, because my son's super proud, because I used to get really angry with him and spank him when he was younger, right? I'm sorry, but that was the way I was raised, right? And I'm not demonizing anybody who spanks their kids, but my son actually told me, Dad, that doesn't do what you think it's going to do.
Yeah.
It just makes me scared of you. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is not, I want you to respect me as your father, but the fear aspect of this, which a lot of our generations and their parents' generations were raised on the fear of their parents, not the safety and the love.
Yeah, I was a yeller.
Right. So, and in that moment, I was like, holy shit. I'm. This is a cycle. This is a generational thing. There's a lot of history to this, right? But in this moment, I'm making this choice as a parent, thinking I have the best intentions for my child because this is the way I was raised. I quickly figured out, and thank God my son has a good articulation for his age. But we've opened that line of communication where it's like, yeah, you are going to teach me a lot over the course of the next 15 years or 10 years now of you living in my house, and that's something that. It's kind of cool because my kid beams up with some pride. He's like, Daddy, I kind of helped you figure this out. I'm like, yeah, you and Seth really helped me figure this out because this is still a long road and still make mistakes. But those are the little things we don't even think about.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I will, I was talking, my uncle, who very much was one of the men in my life that I was fortunate enough to have kind of raised me, came to a football game we had this last Friday. My daughter's on the cheer thing. It's senior night, homecoming, yada, yada. And we were just talking about my two, teenage children. And he's like, brother, the next 10 years are going to be a phase of life where it's going to be new, in discreetly unique challenges that are very different than the first 15-ish years. Yeah. It gets crazy to think that, like, you spend literal 15 years, like, trying to wrap your head around a problem, and then they have new problems you have no experience dealing with. Yep. So the process by which you navigate that stuff is all the more important. Like I was a yeller. I could say that I probably learned some of that behavior, but whatever, like that's just what I did. And it was a combination of coach voice comes out plus my past trauma that comes out in the form of like me reacting that way. Yep. And man, I will never forget Danny when he was super teeny tiny. He slammed the door to his room, and his door had one of those exterior mirrors, so it looked down the hallway to where the door was. So he was tiny, dude. He got pissy like a 4-year-old does, and slams the door. The glass fell. He slammed it hard enough that it fell off. Breaks, shatters glass everywhere in this hallway, and I'm yelling at him at like 10/10. Yeah. Don't come out of your room.
Right.
He thinks that I'm yelling because he broke the glass. Mm-hmm. And it was like, we had a conversation probably a couple years ago. I was like, buddy, I need you to understand the most like shameful moment of parenting I ever had.
Yeah.
Mm. I was trying to keep him safe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of this stuff, man, like your guy giving his kid like 3 different coaching cues. Yep. We're trying to keep kids 100%. Safe. The intention isn't the issue.
100%. Yeah.
But the thing that I had to confront was like you get that feedback from your kid that's not doing the thing that you want it to do, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. There was a different way for me to tell my kid, stay in your room, don't come out. Let's not do like the feet on the glass thing. It's not flipping Die Hard, right? Yeah. I don't want that.
Yep.
I could have said that in a different way, but what came out in that moment was my other stuff. Yeah. And now I've scared my child of me, which is about the worst thing that you can possibly feel as a parent. Yeah. Like, man, it's something.
So as someone who does not have children, who coaches a large amount of children, and maybe one with a parent in this room. Yep. When we have parents, because every coach is going to go through this, who have the best intentions, but are doing a disservice to their child. Yeah. Like pretty clearly. Yeah. What is the best way to handle conversations like those? Is it just like, because I feel like, and I'll open up my vulnerabilities here, but like, I feel like if I were to give one of the guidebooks to one of my parents, the immediate thought of them, and this is me projecting, so I could be wrong, but their immediate thought is, you don't have kids. You're going to tell me how to parent my kids? You don't know what this is like. You don't have kids.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of those conversations I just can't be a part of.
It's part of why we want to incorporate this stuff into organizations like yours, because you guys can only talk to the kids and parents so much, right? And as much as you guys are trying to do the best by both parents and the kids, that's not really your lane. And it's something that in your position, being a younger coach who doesn't have kids, it's not going to be well received. Now, we do talk about in this book and in the coach's book, helping give you the perspective of what parents go through, which I know being around Deven, you know it already, right? But it's like having that awareness, having that awareness in those moments and being able to calm yourself down, because the reaction when a parent starts yelling at you about playing time is immediately say, fuck off. Like at the end of the day, I don't want to hear it from you. I'm the coach. I'm making these decisions, without recognizing like, what are the underlying causes of why this behavior is actually taking place? So that's where we see that gap that needs to be filled, especially in organizations that have kind of not saying you guys are the intense competitive one, right? I know you guys do a really good job of how you're formulating that, but the intensity, that was a big thing that I realized a couple of years ago, was talking to parents in that space. The first thing they want to talk about was how good their kid was, or how their kid was the victim of something that was taking place. And it's like, we're not trying to teach parents to create victim mentalities. We're not trying to encourage parents to text their, we have a exercise in there where we lay out like 4 or 5 scenarios, playing time, whether your kid gets relegated from the A team to the B team. These are conversations and situations that we need to be better prepared for as parents, right? So that we put less stress on the great coaches who get burnt out with dealing with parent drama. And I think that was the quickest thing I realized, is how burnout coaches are with parents. And how there's that communication gap, which we can help build some of that back, but also understand where's the respect in all this, and what needs to be handled by the kid at what point, right? At 14, 15, 16, we better be teaching little Timmy and little Susie to go in and have the conversation with curiosity and intention of wanting to learn on how they can get better to earn more playing time, instead of just say, well, this, and this, these are the reasons why you're not playing because the coach doesn't like you. And it's like, that's not what we're trying to create here.
Yeah. Can I add something to that? There's innovation needed in the club sports world, right? There really is, because parents are the drivers. They are they fund the entire thing. They are by far the most influential kind of character in the space, by far. But clubs don't. Your average. I mean, I'm coming from the soccer world, right? Your average coaching director came from the coaching world, which means they came from the playing world. They're not trained as business people. They're not trained in best practices and how to orchestrate what their responsibility all of a sudden becomes. There's an innovation that's needed. Well, yes, there needs to be a lot more awareness. I mean, you may not be a parenting expert because you haven't done it yet, but you're a coaching expert. In those conversations, you can come into the space and go, listen, I don't know parenting, but I know coaching, and I know that what you're doing here is inhibiting my ability to do my job. And so I need you to back up to that space, and you can speak to that. You just speak from your place of expertise. But wouldn't it be great if your club had already done the due diligence of creating a parent education system that with the amount of energy that we dedicate to certain positions in these clubs, without anybody whose job it is to be a parent liaison. Like I was talking to a coaching director in a pretty big club here in the state, baseball club, and we're literally working on. I'm kind of doing some consulting with him, and we're working on creating a position in his club, which is cultural director and parent liaison, where this is your job all the time. Where these guys are taking, you got your coaching director, you got your admins, you got this stuff, but your job is to educate parents, deal with mental health issues, all this kinds of stuff. I mean, he was coming to me because a club that was close to them a few years ago had 2 kids commit suicide.
Yeah, they're right here.
Yeah. And he's just going, and that's the question, to hit on what we were talking about earlier, how much suffering does it take before we wake up?
Right.
Well, he's going, I can't have that happen in my club, man. Yeah. But now he's going, okay,
Trust me, we had the same thoughts here when all that stuff happened.
Right.
Yep.
Now we have to innovate. The innovation is necessary. We have to get to the point where we recognize what's driving this entire thing. The parents are the key. So, back to the World Baseball Federation, I would literally put huge amounts of resources into parent education, parent understanding, make them a part of the process. If your kids are going to be in our club, there's going to be this process. You're going to go through this book. Our coach is going to go through this guidebook. We're going to actually educate ourselves to the deeper elements of this. And then we're going to begin to create culture. There's a difference between branding and culture. Like, this is my first time stepping in the Driveline. I've heard about you guys for years, seen stories and stuff like that. And so it's interesting because I can see your branding. You guys are really well branded, right? I don't know anything about your culture, right? So it would take me time to experience that. But in the end, you would kind of, culture becomes that thing where in this club, here's what it looks like. Here's what it smells like. Here's what it tastes like. That's the brand. Here's how we are. Right.
Yeah.
The Mandalorian thing. This is the way.
That's
the culture. And how do we create that? And how do we back this thing up and realize we've got this herd of buffalo running towards the edge of a cliff? We're all just watching it happen. How do we back this thing up and go, how do we reorganize this? And it starts with, we bring the most important character, the parents, in at the very earliest age possible. We say, we have to open your minds to what you're about to partake in. And I don't think it would be that hard if we frame it in respect. Because you can frame it to parents. You can go, guys, we're here to show you the respect that's properly due to how hard your task is.
Yeah.
Because parenting in this context, that's why the subtitle is exploring the depths of parenting in the world of youth baseball, because we're saying there's profound depths here, and this is a unique parenting context.
Yeah.
And
Which
to know how to do that.
Yeah, which on the surface is very transactional, right? It's player fees, practice times, this many games. These are all the things that parents care about. And I think that's a product of the system and the way that it's evolved, and you guys have been a power player in that space for a long time, right? So you've got to see things that have worked and things that haven't, but the constant kind of thing that's still floating out there is we have parents in every organization, whether it's Driveline or wherever else, right, that are struggling with this experience because it's hard. Not because they're bad people, not because they want to do wrong by their kid, they want to make their kids feel any bad type of way, but we're not aware of these things. And that's where our job is to come in and start opening the conversation and being able to say, guys, I did it at the highest level. I didn't make the Hall of Fame, and I didn't, play 10 years and make $100 million, but I climbed this ladder that all you guys are looking at your kids and saying, can they do this? And it's like, let's not focus as much on the achievement aspect of this, but what is the experience and how can we enhance that? Most importantly, the parents are the characters, but the kids are the ones that matter. Right? Because this is a generational thing. You were coached by somebody. You were coached by somebody. I was coached by somebody. It's the same as the way as we were parented. And if we're not looking at this from that 10,000-foot view, the generational cycles that are at play here, there's a lot of good things that I learned from coaches that are old school. There's also some things that I know they don't play in today's world. They don't do the things we thought they did. It's the same example I gave with parenting.
Yeah. Well, and specific to our culture, this is our culture.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
this is what you just said is a huge part of the reason why we actually don't do tryouts.
Yeah.
All of our tryouts are like individual basis because we bring in the family. We separate the kid, send them to the cages with our coach so the coach can evaluate. And then we sit there with the parent for the entire time and answer questions, discuss why our program's different, what this looks like, what our culture is like. And that's a really, in my opinion, an impossible thing to do with a larger group tryout.
Yeah.
Because even if you, which we've tried doing, separate the parents and the kids and have the parents in this area getting the rundown on what this program is like and the kids over here, you've got 60% of the parents looking over to see what their kid's doing, not paying attention to what's going on in the slide deck we're trying to show them.
Right.
And you can get them one-on-one, you can have that conversation. And we've had families where we absolutely wanted that kid, and then the dad took the entire, or mom took the entire hour tryout to not pay attention to us, clearly not be on the same page, and just they want to win, they want to play a lot of games, they're not necessarily seeing the reality of the situation with their kid, and we're just we're not in that business. That's going to cause way more problems than it's going to solve if we take that family in, and it allows us to do that and kind of gate our culture a little bit that way.
But it does mean that sometimes we might turn down.
I was just going to say that means that
gives
kid
us
who
leverage.
might have been good, if not for his parents being a little over involved, that kid might not be playing in 2 years.
Which
and that
we've
kills
talked
us,
we've
right,
talked
to
about
not
this
take that
too.
kid.
If you guys do it, somebody else is going to do it for
Right.
you. Right.
100%.
And that's again when you're protecting that culture, it's we're not going to move our line any further this way because this is what we're about and this is the way.
Yeah.
And if they're not in on that, it doesn't mean we need to have all the best kids in the state if they're not bought into what this is about.
Right.
Which ultimately is a really tricky thing to navigate because I think it really calls into question how you're evaluating the output of this experience and what success is,
Yeah.
right? I, again, wasn't that good of a baseball player, but I'm a psychopath about winning.
Yeah.
He's a psychopath about winning. We want to win.
Yeah.
And we make decisions, I think, almost on a daily basis, maybe not on a daily basis, but relatively frequently where we have to chart a path that is respective of the culture that we create here.
Yeah.
that he and I spend hours and hours and hours thinking about. Maintaining. And sometimes it puts us in a place where we make decisions that literally like negatively impact the leverage that we have to be as competitive as we possibly could.
Right.
I will never forget the first year. So before Jeremy was kind of with me on the academy side, the first year that we ran kids coming in, we were going to do teams. We had a kid show up with a parent and a photographer. This guy literally followed the kid during this tryout and was like getting content and he was going to be playing. He was like a 15-year-old that plays 16 the next year. He hit a ball 93, which is like, okay, it's a good place. We're a year one organization, right? We were coming out of COVID. This was August of 2020, or June through August or whatever.
Yeah.
The way that select baseball typically works in our area is that there are players that are evaluating another organization that they're considering joining. Those kids typically have some type of issue that they're trying to resolve, right? Because most of the time, if you won a bunch of games, you're not going to, and you had a successful season, you're not thinking about the other options, right? You're not going to leave.
Yeah.
And that kid, would have been the best hitter that we would have had as year one of our organization. Doing that would have given our teams X amount of additional leverage because we're going to be that much more competitive. And I remember talking about it with some of the guys that were like working the tryouts that day, and it was just like, God, no.
Yeah.
Like, no, absolutely not. Yeah. Can't offer him a spot. Seemed like a great kid too, but like there's something there that just like, man, that ain't it. Right. And I think the thing that we have to navigate in the next like few years is that we have our third facility in Tampa is coming online in November.
God willing.
Yeah,
God willing, hurricane willing. Man, for anybody that's dealing with that and you happen to be listening to this at some point in the future, I hope all your people and your animals and all your property gets through that thing because it sounds like it's going to be nasty.
Yeah.
And I suspect that like facility 4 through 6, let's say, is probably going to come a lot faster than going from facility 1 through 3. Mm-hmm. And we are trying to run this thing in a highly specific and a highly intentional way. Mm-hmm. And so much of that specificity, it is about things like schedule, right? It is about things like, hey, let's not have our 14s play 90 games, right? Like that's a thing that we're not going to do. But it also has things that are, I think, at first glance, a little bit tricky to define in terms of culture. And it freaks me out. It freaks me out all the time. And the most perfect example is like going into a market like Arizona, right? You go into a market like Arizona, man, and it's not the same. It's just not same. The rhythm and the schedule and the calendar and the expectation for customers, which means children, is very, very different. Yep. And we come in and we're like, hey, we're not going to play games every single weekend. And we are going to focus on development. And we are going to focus on gamification. And we're going to do it in a way where you should see like the expression of the culture that we create in this room reflected in the positivity you experience from your coach. But it's not me and it's not him.
Yeah.
And we're at the base level asking parents to take a leap with us and do something different than everybody that they see that's doing. Johnny down the street, their best friend that they go to school with, they're all playing games. So we're asking you to do something different. And inherently, like, we're removing some amount of safety that they feel like they're going to provide their kid because we don't know. We don't know what this is going to look like. This is year one of doing this. Yeah. This is, I don't know about highly, but it's experimental in some way.
Yeah,
and
it's innovation.
Right. I don't want my kid to be a guinea pig.
Yeah.
Right. And like that's a lot of, I want my kid to develop. And I may even understand that means not playing 50 weeks a year. Right. Yeah. But now we're a bridge too far if you're asking me to like be a massive guinea pig here. Yeah. Like, and that's a struggle with like the baseball rich markets like Arizona, Florida that are very different from up here where, maybe the top 15 kids in Washington are getting offers to play for multiple clubs and go the national circuit and do all that. Yeah, Arizona, that's everywhere.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all of these kids are doing that, and it's very, very different than like this market where there are a really large amount of players who aren't going to play in college and aren't maybe even going to play in high school, but like are still playing baseball. Arizona, I feel like those people are gated out quick.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like if you're not that into it.
And the payoff for this very differentiated choice, it's not going to be this year.
Right.
Right.
It's not.
Well, delayed gratification is a pretty important thing to learn.
Right, right. But, you know, and again, this is just like there's a little bit of, you know, capitalism 101 here, where it's like we're trying to chart this path where we can attract people in through differentiators, where it's like stuff like this.
Yep.
Like, hey, this is going to be required.
Yeah.
You know, like previous to, we've done stuff with Positive Coaching Alliance. Hey, it's mandatory for our parents.
Yeah.
It's non-negotiable. It's like it's on the bear. I'm watching season 3. I'm like 4 episodes in. Don't just get into it.
We're just at the end of season 2.
Oh,
Yes.
that's the best. It's non-negotiable. You know, it's non-negotiable. And you know, the only people that I think we've ever told to not come back was parents who just like grossly violated culture and expectation that revolves around stuff like this.
Right.
You know, like it isn't. It's that.
Right. And we found it. The older the athlete is, the easier it is because you delay it's less of a delay in gratification.
Yeah.
Right. We had a bunch of 18U kids who got way better and then immediately went out and played high school and were way better than they were the last year in high school and got noticed and like, yeah, man, that's really easy to like see quickly. Oh, that was worth my decision to do the thing that everyone else wasn't doing and not play fall ball and train. Like now I clearly see that was the right decision. Having that conversation with a 12-year-old,
And a
13-year-old?
and a young parent too. You know, a young parent who hasn't. And again, you know, you're talking about maybe that parent didn't play any high school sports at all, but they have a highly athletic and to some degree or another a motivated young kid, and they think that like those choices serve that child, right? Because it's like, okay, well, to your point, I can go and I can see these travel team rankings, and I see all the games that are being played, and I say, well, why aren't we playing? Why aren't we playing every weekend? Why aren't we doing that? Everybody else is doing that. It's like, oh, well, we're actually working on the skill, and we're also working on the skill in a gamified way so that it's fun for your kid.
yeah,
Right.
And it's
Well,
accessible for them.
There's something that's been popping in my head while I've been listening to you guys, because what you're talking about, and I think this is, you know, I was talking earlier about there needs to be innovation. You know, you guys are talking, everybody's talking about what's the best way to do player development. You guys are not talking about development, you're talking about evolution. You're talking about player evolution, and that's different, right? It's evolution is something where the container grows as the thing within grows. You know, it's like the way a flower blooms or a tree grows. You know, it's like, well, when does the tree reach its full size? When it's time. And it takes a type of. I think that all the suffering we're seeing in the player development world is because we are developing in a way that's actually an antithesis to the natural evolution that a player wants to do. And so there's a way of you guys, and almost like you guys are saying that you're trying to slow this thing down, reel it back into, hey, we're actually, it's a little bit trying to speed up the flow of a river. You can't do that. Like, we actually have to get to the point where we learn how not to fight the current of what he's naturally trying to do. And that's why what we're trying to do, we are trying to get to the point where we take the mental, emotional, psychological, and even spiritual development of a kid and place it at its proper space underneath this entire thing so that the evolution happens in it as it was meant to. It cannot be rushed. And if we do that, you know, everybody goes, we won't make technically good players. We will make far more players that can handle the evolutionary process, sustain the evolutionary process, and maintain success. That's what we want to do. We don't want to see awesome players. We want to see a larger quantity of players that can continue to improve on into their 30s. And it can handle the ups and the downs and the failures and the successes. So we're talking about an evolutionary process rather than a developmental one. Does that make sense?
100,000, 100,000
Definitely
million
steal it.
percent.
Player evolution's
I'm
coming soon to
I'm going to steal that.
Yeah. Well,
Cue the Pearl Jam song.
and to put it in a very acute example, my kid's in the academy. My kid.
Yeah.
And I've used this joke all the time, so I'll just wash, rinse, repeat. my wife and I don't create players with like human beings with like elite genetics.
Right.
You know, like that's not a thing that we do. I'll make you a kid with like sturdy hips and maybe some decent shoulders. Like we can do that.
Yeah.
We can do that. Both of my kids got that. There's no Aaron Judge, right? And I'm so thankful that we found here because I don't know how I don't know what other ecosystem would have provided him that capacity for evolution. And not to say that like that has to get him someplace to be valid. Rather, it's going to get him to the place that he drives it to, and this is just the most free expression of that.
Yeah.
Right? There's no guarantee. Like I would feel gross. I would feel incredibly gross if I ever had to go to a parent and be like, "Hey, I'm going to get your kid into college baseball." I would feel disgusting to say that. What I would say is that like I think we'll get you close to the truth of how good you could be.
That's evolutionary.
But you got to be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
You have to be comfortable with that because that statement is very swimming upstream from strap the. We've cursed a couple times on this pod. We can just break the seal, right? Yeah. Strap the fucking thing on my kid, and it's going to increase his exit velo like 6 miles an hour. Because that's an ad that I get fed on Instagram basically every single day.
Or buy the new hottest bat and like lie about how hard your kid can actually hit the ball because now you got a really hot bat that'll carry him until he's 13.
I mean, so we just got some new rules from some of the local tournament providers that we they put on the games that we kind of have to participate in.
We have no choice.
And it appears that they are moving all of the pre 14U divisions to the USSSA bat standard, right? I don't know if you're very well versed on this stuff, we'll see how well I can explain this.
Dead bat or hot bat?
Hot
bat.
Soccer is a much simpler.
Yeah,
sport.
This isn't.
Imagine if they made a soccer ball that moved faster off a kid's foot.
Okay.
By a decent amount. Let's say 15 to 20%.
Yeah.
So kids who can't actually kick the ball as hard as they think they can are just firing balls on goal. Therefore, feeling like they maybe don't need to develop and train that skill because I already kicked the ball really hard.
Yeah.
So it appears that the organizations that we have, the local option that we have for putting our kids into games, they've all kind of changed their rules to now allow these really hot bats. Yeah. They're doing that because
I was going to say why.
the thing to understand is that several years ago, Little League International, which still has the largest like total body of players in one place. They partnered with USA Baseball, Dr. Alan Nathan, and some other people to create what was called the USA Bat Standard. And USA Bat, in a youth version of it, basically performs very similar to wood bats. Okay. And they made that choice, I want to say in 2017, 2018-ish. They made that choice because of what we saw at the time, which is incredibly hot youth bats, which is not necessarily problematic generally. Like, I get the argument that hot bats are fun. Yeah. What is a problem is both the safety aspect of it, because now you have a child that's 46 feet away from that bat, and it is artificially inflating hitting performance, and that child probably doesn't do a great job of PFPs and catching liners right at their face, so there's some danger. Yeah. And to Jeremy's point, it's also kind of perverting the truth about skill development, which is an issue because in youth baseball, it's on a tiny field. And then you get to this other field that's like 340 whatever % greater in square footage. And you need to have skills that allow you to be competitive in that new real estate. So not only is it dangerous, but it's also developmentally perverted.
Right.
So they created the USA Bat Standard. It's mandatory in Little League. You can't swing these hot bats in Little League, but you could swing them in tournaments. So now, what do parents want to see? Right? I want to see my kid hitting tanks, whether their swing sucks or not, whether they can create bat speed or not, whether they can create flush contact or not. So I buy my kid the bat that's going to give them the most leverage to perform the way that I want them to perform. So now we, for the last several years, have been in a world where our kids could go into tournaments, and the tournaments didn't allow the hot bats. So our teams didn't swing the hot bats. So not only on the training side, we get kind of the truth about how they perform, but that's reflected in competition as well.
Yep.
Well, now this year, it appears
We're gonna have to take some knives to a gunfight.
Yeah.
and that's literally the choice. We either take a knife to a gunfight, or we just kind of embrace the fact that like all these kids are going to now swing bats that like again truly pervert and distort the truth of how they can hit.
It makes most of the data we'll collect off those kids in training relatively
Basically
useless.
meaningless.
Yeah.
Basically meaningless.
Rush the evolution.
And ultimately, none of this really matters because when you get to high school, actually when you get to 14, you have to swing a BB Corps bat anyways.
Yeah.
And our whole thing has been all about like what are milestones that are achievable, right? If I can't tell a player, I'm going to promise you that you can go play Division I baseball. I'm going to promise you're going to play college baseball, period. What can I promise? What I can promise is that I'm pretty convicted, and I know Jeremy is, that like if you do this thing, we can help you have a competitive high school baseball experience. That's the thing that we can deliver.
Yeah.
Because we're going to train the skills that allow you to get there. We're going to do it in a container that's ideally not going to burn you out, or will control the variables that we can control for to not have that happen.
Yeah.
And let's just have as much fun along the way. Like that's a thing that we can reasonably deliver. And that thing is predicated on an implement that's very different than the hot bat that you're now not only allowed to swing, but you're incentivized to swing.
Yeah. I had a funny story in Little League. We figured out you could use softball bats.
BPF 1.2.
We were rocking the softball bats, I think 11 and 12-year-old year with like a 2-foot barrel on
Oh,
them.
yes, sir.
Probably some of the early success thanks to the softball bats. 9-year-old, we won it with regular bats.
I'll
But
bet.
we had a couple coaches that figured out that was I don't know if it's still probably not legal anymore. But
No, it wouldn't have been legal back then.
whatever we did was legal, though. I know we swung softball bats, but this is 99, 2000.
Yeah. I'll play on my bat nerd card here. So the USSSA baseball bats, it's a BPF bat performance factor of
Yep.
1.15. Softball bats, they allow them to ramp it up to 1.2.
Okay.
So another third on top. And the context for that is Dr. Alan Nathan, who was involved with the creation of this standard. He's one of the most brilliant guys that gets into like the physics of baseball.
Yeah.
He made an offhanded comment on Twitter years and years and years ago that relative to so the USA bats don't have a BPF, a bat performance standard ranking. It's just a USA bat. But what Dr. Alan Nathan said is that the USA bats are like a 1.02. So if a brick wall is 1 in terms of like trampoline factor off the bat,
Yeah.
and a USA bat is 1.02, a 1.15 for a baseball bat U-trip, or a 1.2 as the softball bat, that is a massive increase.
Yeah.
It's a massive increase. And it's going to help.
Yep.
It's going to help.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to help your kid?
Yep.
And, and again, like at the top end of the bat market now, you have bats like the Hype Fire that like ostensibly are graded on the same performance scale, but seem to outperform it by a decent amount.
They do. They do.
To the point that some of these bats have actually been banned in competition because they went back and tested them and were like, this doesn't conform to the rating.
Yeah.
And all of this, again, exists in a world where you've got parents that are simply incentivized to try to help their child perform.
Right.
Or what they think is going to help them perform. Yeah. And we will over-index for, hey, if I've got $3 or $4 or $450 or whatever it costs to buy one of these hot bats, I'll do that. And I will spend zero time thinking about how to provide an emotionally safe experience for my child.
Yeah.
Or grade the evaluation or grade the organization that I'm thinking about my player ended up playing for along those same metrics.
Right.
Are you going to provide an emotionally stable and safe place for my child to be?
Yeah. Which is the challenge of the capitalism 101, right? It's like
Yep.
we're all in business to provide for our families and to build something that's sustainable, but how do you do that with the ethical choices that come with being a youth sports coach, which you guys wrestle with every single day, right? It's why you formed the academy, because you wanted to do it differently.
Yep.
And how you evolve, the evolution of player development. How do you get parents to understand that? The same way we're trying to get parents to understand the mental, emotional experience here is completely different than what we've put it into this box and made it out to be.
Yeah, because the marketplace,
Supports
it's the B problem.
Yep.
It's the B problem, right? There are some things that I very much understand. At scale, parents don't understand this stuff, which I'm 20 minutes late for my next meeting, is exactly why you need to go to 3athletics.com and buy Hero. What else we need to cover?
You have to zoom in on that one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things we need to cover, but we don't have time.
We don't.
Well, this
You
thing
guys live
is
close. We can have you back.
Yeah,
on.
that's right. This thing is episodic. So go to 3athletics.com. It's just 3athletics.com, right?
Yep.
Go to 3athletics.com. You've got, for coaches, there is a journal that's out now.
Coaching Revolution, it's formatted very similar to the parent guidebook. So there's 8
Yep.
exercises in that one for coaches. We got 9 exercises in for the parents, and then we have 6 months, as you went through with your son, for
Yep.
the athlete's journal with weekly entries. So all in this idea of what are we bringing into this as adult? What is our why behind the decisions that we make, and how can we empower our kids to develop that sense of self-awareness and really be able to build the skills at scale, right? As you talk about in the baseball side of things, mental, emotionally, becoming that person that they want to be.
It's actually a fun read too. It's not. I know if there are these the guidebook concept maybe not doesn't sound, but it's actually really fun.
There's lots of space to write. You don't actually have to read all 85 pages. We got little lines in there for you to take notes. So it's an interactive experience.
Yeah, and like, man, I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't have, my son. I think it's fair to say had a profound experience going through the Athlete Journal.
Nice.
I can say from a coaching point of view that he changed.
Yeah.
Like he changed as an athlete going through that.
Well, and that's where,
the goal,
again, we start with one, and then we, as you guys know, we scale this thing to where we can have a much bigger impact on the community of sports, because what kids are experiencing is not what they deserve.
Yep.
Well, make no mistake, our goal is to put this in the hands of every single parent in America whose kid is playing sports. Every single one. We want to do the evolution.
Yeah. So if you, dear listener, one of the 160, however, some odd thousand people that listen to this show, are a parent, if you're running a team, if you're running a league, 3athletics.com.
Yeah.
Go talk to Seth and Trav.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us on, guys.
Of course.
Appreciate
Absolutely. I'm not kidding, man. We can do this again because I know we can get, there's a lot
We will.
more.
We'll all schedule our schedules better so I don't have to drive north in rush hour traffic, and he didn't miss 2 meetings and you're late for yours. But it was all worth it.
Yeah.
Driving north in rush hour traffic, no joke.
It's going to be a beauty.
Yeah, it ain't.
You do it. You've done it a few times. So.
Once or twice. Once or twice. Yeah, I looked at the mileage on my car and it was just like, okay. I've never put this amount of miles on a car, but that's fine. Yeah. No defense segment this week. We'll do that next time.
I had one too. No, I'm not gonna remember it now.
Well, White Sox.
I mean, yeah, just don't. You can have it the way. You know what? I will take 20 seconds to. If you're a fan going to a playoff baseball game, please bring the passion and intensity, and please don't throw shit on the field. I swear to God.
What are we doing?
Yeah, that was bad.
Don't throw shit on the field.
What are we doing? You watched the Castellanos walk-off yesterday?
I did not, because I was at practice.
So much fun. So much
I was
fun.
watching our kids hit bombs.
That was a trick question. You passed.
I passed.
Yeah.
We caught it in the car. That's all I got. We'll have Connor White is going to join us next week. We're going to talk all about force plate data, much promised. I don't know why we've promised this like very potentially boring topic.
Now you say we.
Yeah. I have promised we're going to talk about force plates. It's like the whole like quantification
I'm
of athletic
fascinated
performance.
by force plates. Only touch the surface. Don't know enough about them.
Yeah, I mean it's just.
I think one of the bigger things we want to talk about is that we don't really know a ton of what's going on because like we have predictive algorithms.
Yeah.
And we don't do so. We have like the isometric mid thigh pull, and we don't do that with athletes under 16 because the back isn't developed yet, and that could hurt them. But we test athletes under 16. And we estimate what we think their force production is going to be.
Yeah.
And we this year finally have a group of athletes that we've had for a while. Mm-hmm. We've been training them athletically, and they finally did the IMTV for the first time, and almost all of them, blew the predicted numbers out of the water.
Nice.
So it's like, okay, great. They're producing force at a level way higher than we predicted they would be, but why?
Yeah.
Like, where is the algorithm messing up? Is it just like we've done a really good job training these kids? The algorithm goes mostly off of like height, weight data, stuff like that. So are we just beating biology? And I think there's a bunch of questions there too.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, again, ultimately, it's like, I'm just pretty sure that part of the reason you had such like a dominant youth and high school career is because you were just a better athlete than everybody.
I was 6 foot 225 as a freshman and 5'8", 185 at 13. So most kids aren't reaching those benchmarks. And
right.
Again, I love to
5'8",
practice, and so I put in a lot of work. But physically speaking, I was bigger than everybody.
Yeah.
What were you at 14 or 13? 5'8",
13, 5'8", 185. Freshman year, 6 foot 225.
Yeah.
I have an entire team of 16-year-olds. I have one that weighs more than you did at 13.
Yeah.
But that's what you see everywhere, right? Like all of the best teams.
And how many of those
biological
kids don't end up pursuing baseball at the next level because at some point everybody starts to grow with them, or they stop working, whatever it is, right?
The one that kills me the most is the kids that are on that team when they're young, and then everyone else starts to pass them, and they just get cut.
Yep.
And then it's just like their sense of identity is gone.
Yeah. Happens at every level,
Yep.
right? Not just getting sent down from the big leagues.
Yeah, and because like ultimately, I'm pretty convicted that this professionalization of youth sport is running more kids out of the game prematurely, and we're never going to have any idea how good they could be.
Right.
And that's just a net loss.
Yeah.
That's a net loss. And again, is part of the reason why we want to lean into our differentiators, wash, rinse, repeat the last hour and a half or whatever we've been talking. I am Deven. He is Jeremy. We're Down by Law. Catch you next time. Thanks. Bye.